Greetings, everyone, and welcome to a very special Gotham Pretty edition of Monster Party.
Monster Party!
Monster Party!
Oh! Flap, 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 flap.
Flap, flap, flap. That is your. That's your. Okay, that's better. That sound. What is that song?
What is that music? Hey,
What music are you doing?
Hey, welcome.
No. You answer the question, sir. What is that stupid music you're singing?
Hey, and who are you, sir?
I'm Matt Weinhold.
I'm SHAWN Sheridan.
Oh, and I'm Larry Strothe.
And I'm James GONIS.
I'm feeling kind of superheroistic
I think
today.
you feel a little
Is
batty.
that right?
I think.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've got bats in my belfry.
Right.
Wow.
And maybe the Joker as well. Ooh,
Oh.
there's a hint, even though you already know what this episode is. So anyway, look, we've talked about superheroes. We love superheroes.
We
Yes.
do.
Yeah.
And we love them in all their forms, comic books, cartoons, live action. We love superheroes. But there
Yep.
are a few iconic ones that really stand out. And this particular one is certainly one of my favorites. And we've talked about this character, but we haven't talked about really the whole history of this character. And that's what we're
Right.
going to do for this episode. So the topic for this episode is the Batman Legacy.
The Batman Legacy.
The Batman Legacy.
The Batman Legacy.
That's love theme. That's love theme from Batman.
Curse you.
Curse you. Whip, curse you.
Well, that's,
Okay.
the Catwoman.
I'll go with it.
Come on. Okay.
That's Catwoman. Okay.
But Matt, look,
Yes,
if we're
tell me.
doing something as iconic as Batman,
Yes.
how can we possibly do it? We need someone who knows the history of Batman. Who can we possibly get?
Well, look,
Well-
I mean, we all love Batman. I would say that we dabble more than most people, but we don't have the kind of encyclopedic knowledge that one would need to do an episode like this. So
Right.
who could we
No.
get?
Indeed. We are very, very fortunate to have an ideal guest for this topic. This guest is a professional Batman consultant
Whoa!
and a semi-professional Batman historian.
Wow.
Listeners will remember him from our games episode, which was a ton of fun.
Yes.
He is a Disney Imagineer and VR designer. He's had a 25-year career in video and board games. He currently teaches game design at the New York Film Academy and USC's Interactive Media Department.
Sweet.
And some of his published games include Ray Guns and Rocket Ships, Pantone the Game, and Alien Fate of Nostromo.
Oh.
And last but certainly not least, he is a good friend of ours. We see him at all the
Yes, he is.
conventions. And he's a Monster Party listener. Guys,
Right.
let's welcome back Scott Rogers.
Scott Rogers,
Scott.
Welcome
in the
back, Scott.
house.
the Batman
hello.
expert. There we
Scott
go.
in the cave.
A bat welcome.
Now, I feel a little not imposter syndrome, but because none of the games that I've worked on and it's almost 30 years now, by the way, I'm old. But I've not had the fortune to work on a Batman game. But my bona fides are that I am a lifelong Batman fan. I read Batman comics before I could read. I learned how to read from the comics.
Wow.
And you're right. I have been hired as a Batman consultant by several different companies, including Corgi, WizKids, and Mattel.
No.
So yeah. So I whenever they need some sort of obscura or maybe a reference image or something like that,
Right.
I own a collection of I've read everything that's ever been published about the character, and I own everything from 1964 to present day.
Wow.
So how you guys collect Godzillas and movies and things like that, my focus is Batman. That's always been my main number one collection.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
How did it start?
It started in I'm about the same age as you guys. So I was born a few years after the show premiered. So I actually didn't experience Batmania for myself.
Right.
I got into it through reruns. And my mother has a story where she would go around, and once she found out that I liked Batman, my mom was always great about indulging my interests. And she went to the store and said, "Do you have any Batman stuff, any toys or anything?" And the guy at the store goes, "Lady, Batman's passé."
Oh.
And so at that point, this was the early 70s. Batman hadn't quite gotten his second big boost yet that he got, right? But it wasn't very long. It was 1972 when the Mego figures came out.
Right.
And that was I had already been reading or looking at the comics, and I also had a golden record that was in a box set, and it came with like a ring and a badge and a membership card. But most importantly, it came with a comic book that the record would read along with, and the stories in it were Batman's origin, Robin's origin, and what is probably still to this day one of my favorite Batman stories, called The Joker's Utility Belt. And
tell.
It's a story where the Joker says, "I'm sick of getting my butt kicked by Batman because he's got all these great things in his belt, so I'm going to make a belt of my own." And he puts all types of crazy novelty things in it, like Mexican jumping beans, and he has a badge that squirts ink into people's faces, and his secret weapon is a cork. And his henchmen are like, "Gee, Joker, why do you have a cork in your belt?" And he's like, "Oh, that's the thing that's going to make me undo Batman and Robin." And he puts it in a bottle of champagne, and they bust it on a ship when they're christening a ship, because Batman and Robin used to christen ships all the time back in the 40s.
Sure, everybody knows that.
They would show up to anything, right? Bank openings or,
shopping store opening.
Cutting the ribbon, whatever. They were, friendly, happy, duly appointed deputies of the law.
Right.
But a bunch of gas comes out, and it knocks out Batman and Robin. And of course, what does Joker do? He takes a gun, shoots him in the head. No, he takes him back to his lair, and he sticks him on this very elaborate conveyor belt that Robin is running, keeping from falling into a furnace.
It could happen.
And then Batman very cleverly gets a hold of Joker's belt and uses all the gags against Joker. And the last laugh is on Joker, as it always is.
That's cool.
Can I say something about that just for a moment? Because now you're describing this story, and this is right after the period of the television show. The 60s
The record is from that, after that period, but the story is actually from the 1940s.
Oh, is that right?
Wow.
Really?
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. These were all reprints that were in this record.
I see. Okay.
But they were like audio, like radio dramas.
Okay.
So you would listen to the story and the acting, and they have sound effects and all that. And you can find this on YouTube, of course. There's just look up Batman Joker's Utility Belt. It's a wonderful piece of audio, and very, very nicely done. So this led me towards finding more about the comic books, because I was like, well, this isn't. I was also getting current comics, and at the time, the artist and writing team on Batman was Neil Adams and Denny O'Neil.
Oh,
and so
golden age.
I was looking
not
at
the golden age.
Well, but a
Silver
classic
age.
age.
A great period. Yeah.
Some people call it the Bronze Age. I don't like that. I don't
Bronze
like the middle
Age, okay.
naming. I think it's dumb. But anyway, so as a kid, I was saying, well, wait a second. The Batman that I'm seeing in these comics is one version where he's much darker and Joker is scarier and all that. And so, wait, where did this other one come from? And so because I lived in San Diego, and there were comic stores, because of Comic-Con, I would start. Well, this was before I went to Comic-Con, but I found out about comic stores. And so when I go there was a great place called, was it Comic Castle? I think the name of it was. It was in like,
sounds familiar.
Yeah, it used to be in downtown San Diego, and it long gone, unfortunately. but I found old issues of Batman and Detective
Cool.
and World's Finest and all these other books that Batman were in. And so I started to, like, whenever we go, I'd say, Dad, can I get one comic? And my dad was like, well, okay. They're like, I think they were like 10-cent books when they first came out. And then I think they wanted like $1. So my dad was like, all right, I'll buy it for $1. It's okay. So I started to buy these vintage comics, but they were all reader copies. Like, I wasn't collecting them yet. I was just reading them, and I'd read them to tatters. And but I started, like, anytime I'd see a cover with the Joker on it, I'd buy it. Anytime I saw the Riddler, I'd buy it. Anytime I saw, like, I love the supervillains the most in the Batman universe. And so those were the books that I started to gravitate towards. But at the same time, I'm also slowly starting to buy the books that are out currently. But as you guys know, in those days, the distribution was through supermarkets and 7-Elevens.
Yes.
And, a place, there were no other
Liquor
than
stores.
liquor stores. Yeah. Any place that kids would go, right? Liquor stores. And
You knew my dad.
the smoke shop,
Right. Yeah. The head shop. Well, the head shops used
Gentlemen's
to weird me
Club.
out, actually. But yeah. But anyway, so I wasn't able to buy consecutively. So I would get like one issue, and then like I'd miss a couple issues, and then I get another one. And so my collection was very spotty at first. And it wasn't until the 80s, which was kind of the heyday of the direct market, when that started to develop and comic stores started to become a thing, was I able to go back and go, oh, I'm missing a bunch of things I need to. And then Comic-Con, of course, I would also go and I would talk to the guys there and kind of say, oh, tell me more. What are the good things? And I would go through and dig through the long boxes and pull stuff out and say, oh, this looks like a cool cover. I'll buy that. So
That's
so
cool.
could you give us a little bit of a history of Batman, the character, his creation, and how that whole thing got going?
Because because I love this story about the comics and stuff, but where did he come from? Or how long ago was that?
Came from an egg, Larry. No, I'm kidding.
Listeners, please listen to after the show, and that will be explained.
No, so the story starts in 1938, and in 1938, there's a little character. I don't know what happened to him though. That was called Superman, and he became a huge smash hit. Right, sold millions of copies of this fledgling art form called a comic book that had only been around for a few years prior for this company called National. And the guys that ran National were like, we want this to happen again. We need lightning to strike twice. Well, there was a young cartoonist, a fellow named Bob Kane, who was doing some pretty forgettable strips at National. He was doing like little 1-page, 6-panel, 9-panel comics, and he had a couple other characters, but they were all kind of cartoony and dumb. And he overheard this. The story goes, he overheard this conversation of them saying, we need another Superman. And Bob Kane was like, I will make you another Superman and I'll have it to you by Monday. And so he ran home, and this kid, he's like 18 years old at the time. So pretty young kid, but out of high school at this point. And he whips up what he thinks is the surefire character that's going to, unseat Superman from his mantle. And he draws this character that has blonde hair. He wears a red Union suit, and he has a domino mask, so he looks a little bit like Mr. Incredible, and he has big bat wings. And he says, ta-da, I have created the best character ever called Bat-Man. But he kind of says, well, I have a friend who is a really creative guy. Let me show this idea to him, and let's see what he thinks. And this fellow's name is Bill Finger. And Bill Finger is the unsung hero of the Batman story. Yep. And he has a long history where we can talk more about what happens with Bill Finger later, but at the time, Finger looks at it and he goes, this isn't so good. You can do better. And he says, well, first of all, let's put him in darker colors, because bats are usually darker and they're scarier and they come out at night. So let's put him in blue and gray and get rid of the red. And then let's give him a mask that looks like a bat. So let's give him a cowl with ears, and the eyes are white, so he looks scarier. So he looks more like a bat. He has that silhouette of the bat. Right. And then if you give him the bat wings, maybe we make that more like a cape and less like actual wings, then it will make more sense. It'll look, this is what a real person might wear. Right. And this guy, you're saying, Bob, that maybe this guy's a detective. So let's put gloves on his hands, so that way he doesn't leave fingerprints when he's checking out a crime scene or something like that. and let's give him this belt, and let's put all types of cool things in the belt that he can use to help. And maybe some rope that he can swing on, or maybe some sort of boomerang that he can use or gas pellets or something like that. So Finger really is the creator of Batman, in my opinion. He's the guy that he also puts the bat signal on the chest, right? So if you don't have any of these things, you don't have Batman. And Finger's contribution goes even further. We can talk about that in a second. But what happens is Bob Kane goes back to National on Monday, and he's got this revised drawing that he made of Batman, and he shows it to him, and he's like, this is my guy, Batman, and this is who I think you should do next. And they were like, we love it. And so Bob Kane goes, all right, well, here's the thing. My dad's a lawyer, so I know something about the law and copyright law, blah, blah, blah. So I want you to sign this contract that says you're going to give credit to me as the sole creator of Batman in perpetuity, and I always will get a cut of the money. And the National guys were like, well, this guy isn't as dumb as Schuster and Siegel, who signed away the rights to Superman for like $3,000. But, they were like, I'm sure we can make tons of money. If this guy's half as successful as Superman, this will be worth signing. So they supposedly signed this thing. Now, nobody's ever been able to find this contract, or nobody cops to its existence. But this was supposedly, by all rumor, the deal that Bob Kane had going forward. And DC, National became DC. And actually, the title DC stands for Detective Comics, which was the book that Batman premiered in, which was issue number 27 it was in April, I think, of May of 1939. And so all the way up through the 60s, DC and Kane more or less collaborated on the lie that Kane was the sole artist and writer and creator of Batman.
Oh,
no.
And so he had, of course, this wasn't true. And he had many, particularly in the early years of Batman, there were, like, within year 3 of the creation of Batman, and that there were fellas like Jerry Robinson and Sheldon Moldoff and Charlie Paris and George Rossos and Fred Ray and Jack Burnley. But these were all guys that were getting screwed out of their credit by Kane and Finger, of course, and a few other writers as well, Gardner Fox and folks like that. And this was, it was a well-known dirty secret in the comic book industry. For when I first started going to Comic-Con, and I was like, oh, I love Batman. The first thing I'd always hear from guys like Jack Kirby and John Romita and, whoever, they'd be like, oh, Bob Kane's a son of a bitch. And they would tell me these stories about what a jerk he was. And so the irony was so the first Comic-Con I went to, my father knew that I loved comic books, and he would bring them to me from these stores in San Diego where he worked. And so usually when I was like sick, he'd bring home comics and things like that. And so he found out that I think it was the 1976 or 7 Comic-Con was going to have Bob Kane as a special guest, because Kane lived out back east, and it was these comic guys sometimes didn't come out for Comic-Con.
Sure.
But he found out that Kane was going to be there. So he loaded me and my family up in our car, and we lived in Escondido, which was about an hour north of San Diego. And we drove down, and this was when the Comic-Con was held in the El Cortez Hotel.
Oh, yeah.
So we park at the El Cortez, we go running up the stairs, we go up into the ballroom where Kane is supposed to be. We get there, and there are like guys, he had Batman. At this point, Kane was painting these kind of big paintings that kind of show that, hey, I could draw. But we had just missed him by 5 minutes. And but we were like, well, what's the rest of this thing? So we wandered around Comic-Con, and I said, this is amazing. I want to come back here every year if I can. So I never got to meet Kane. This was like 70, like I said, 76, 77. And I didn't really have an opportunity to meet Kane until 89, when the movie was, huge, the Burden movie. But by that point, I'd heard so many stories about what an SOB Kane was. I was like, you know what? I don't even want to meet that guy. F him. Wow. So I never actually met Bob Kane, and I had opportunities to, but either I missed him, or I just was like an angry young man, indignant about how he treated everybody else.
Scott, my mind is just blown. I'm sorry. I just want to say that. I thank you for saying the record straight, because I did not know that.
Well, there's a whole documentary on it called Bill the Boy Wonder, and there's a book too. And there was I forget the name of the fella that did the documentary and the book, but he got very obsessive about restoring Bill Finger's rights to the Batman legacy.
Oh, wow, that's great.
And he was like, this is so unjust. I've got to fix this. And he literally spent years. So Finger had gotten divorced. He had a son. The son was gay, so they weren't sure if he had ever been married. And then the son had died of AIDS in the 80s. So this guy, as he was doing his research, was like, well, this is a dead end. But the problem is, the only way you can prove, like, get someone to say, look, you can get proper credit for something, is if you can get like a blood heir to like vouch for them, right? So
Right.
he needed a blood heir to do this. But he did this. He started doing this detective work and started talking to cousins, like found cousins and found neighbors and people that knew the ex-wife and this and that. And eventually he found that the son, I think his name was Fred, had a daughter named Athena, and she is the granddaughter of Bill Finger. So she's the heir to the Finger Batman legacy. And through Athena, they were able to file the paperwork to DC and say, look, this is unjust. You've been doing this for years, and you should restore Bill Finger's name to all things Batman. And so when what year Batman versus Superman came out in 2016? Yeah, that was the first DC release product with Bill Finger's credit on it, and
great.
He's been on everything ever since.
Wow.
So we got justice. Yay.
I have a question though about when it comes to the story of Batman, the origin story.
Right.
Where did that come from? Was that a collaboration with Kane and Bill Finger, or was that originally from Kane? Like all the stuff about, his parents were killed. And
so I talk smack about Bob Kane, but he did also him and Finger collaborated, and there's no way to tell which is which, but the influences, they were both young kids, and so they kind of wore their influences on their sleeves. And so Batman, has a lot of fathers that are from the pulp era. So of course the most obvious is the Shadow, right? But then you also have the Phantom. You
Spirits,
have the Spirit is 40 or 41. Yeah, it's later.
Okay.
Spirit's a contemporary of Batman. But anyway, so really the big influences are the Phantom, Shadow, Zorro, and the Scarlet Pimpernel. And then the Bat Whispers, which was a movie.
Roland West.
Yeah, exactly. So those things kind of were combined into an amalgamation. So from the Scarlet Pimpernel, you get the fop by day, but crime fighter by night. The Zorro, you get the mask and the cape and the darkness and all that. From the Shadow, the same thing, and the scaring the villains. From the Phantom, kind of the same thing, right? A little bit more of a superhero than the rest of them. And so they combined all these traits. And this was one of the great things, I think, why Batman was such an immediate success, was that, so Superman is this super strong guy. He's kind of a wish fulfillment character, right? I wish we had a guy that would take care of, the Nazis or take care of my evil landlord or whatever. But Batman was a detective. And he's very much from that mold of detectives. And even the earliest stories of Batman. So the first year in Detective Comics, there have been some amazing work that people have done over the years, thanks to the internet. But there are a few Batman stories where you can point to them and go, okay, the first story, which is the Case of the Chemical Syndicate, is really just a ripoff of a Shadow story, right? Like, so these guys were just copying until they kind of got their feet under them.
Right.
So you can find the first year has like 3 or 4 stories that are essentially ripoffs. But back then, nobody knew, right? You couldn't find those books or those magazines because they were long out of print and nobody cared, and they were all pulped, right? And you watch a movie once and then you forget about it, and you read it and you go,
you don't see it again.
Seems kind of familiar, right?
Sure.
Yeah,
So these guys were just, they're ripping off stuff left and right. Their influences are all over. Kane, who did art for the first few years of the book, there's whole websites of people that have said, look how Kane has copied Flash Gordon from the newspaper comics here, and this pose is from a Tarzan. Like, there's a very famous pose of Batman kind of hunched over, and it's Tarzan from like a Hogarth drawing.
No.
Right. So these they're young kids, right? They're ripping stuff off all over the place.
But they're super passionate
like
about it, and they're
the Milton Berle of comic books.
But Scott, and isn't it kind of a common? I mean, it was a pretty common thing back then with the whole thing about who's the creator of a character, because wasn't that with Marvel? Yeah. Wasn't it Steve Ditko for a while? Wasn't getting
Jack Kirby
Kirby for Spider-Man and all the other some of the Marvel characters.
To Stan Lee's credit, because Stan Lee is another one who's gotten a lot of particularly after his death, has gotten a lot of shade thrown on him and some books written about him that say some unflattering things. But having taken a hard look at what that relationship is, because that's another group that I love the Ditko Lee era of Spider-Man.
Oh,
it's maybe my second favorite run of comics. But and then I also recently have gotten more into the Kirby Lee stuff, although I was never really a big fan of it when I was a kid. But to Stan's credit, he always listed them as what they did. I mean, he might have diminished their involvement, because I know that Ditko and Kirby both left because they didn't feel like they were getting enough credit for the ideas and the characters they were coming up with. Right. But to Marvel's credit, everybody had a credit, had a letter, a credit box in the book. Everybody knew who Ditko was. Everybody knew who Kirby was. Like, it wasn't like Bob Kane, where he was actively hiding the presence of these other collaborators.
Wow.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Wow.
Talking about influences from the period, it also occurs to me that the Rogues Gallery, the villains in Batman, also maybe owed a debt to the Rogues Gallery of grotesque villains in Dick Tracy.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
For sure.
Like half and half is Two-Face, and there's some, like, if you look at Prune Face, he's kind of like some of the early drawings of Clayface look a bit like Prune Face. And so there are, again, these kids were just, they were kids, and they were just reading the comics. They were going to movies. They were reading pulps. And so everything they just ingested became reflected on the pages of Batman.
The one thing that I think distinguishes Batman from a lot of other comic book heroes is that he did have the most interesting array of villains.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I would argue, I mean, Spider-Man is a pretty great one too, but I would still put my money on Batman just for sheer depth and variety. The visual, super exciting visuals. The Joker is arguably, when people say who are the most popular characters in comics, they always forget Robin, because most people can't say Batman without saying Robin. And the Joker, who has gotten to the point, thanks to the new movies and just time, right? Joker has always been a popular character, and I would argue that he might be DC's second or third most maybe third or fourth most popular character, right? Even to this day.
In many cases, he is more popular than even Batman.
In some cases, I would definitely put him above. Like, if you're looking at the hierarchy, I would even put him above Wonder Woman. And usually people go Superman, Batman.
I totally agree. Totally agree.
But I think Joker, and maybe even to modern audiences, Harley Quinn is up there as well.
Oh, right? Sure.
Oh,
people would always talk about, I have some friends over the years who are into the Flash, and they'd always talk about the Rogues Gallery of the Flash and how
Flash does have a good Rogues Gallery.
I don't really agree. I think they're okay. I don't think they're bad, but compared to Batman.
Well, what I love about Flash's Rogue Galleries, particularly in the beginning of his, like, when the character was reinvented in the 60s, the Rogues Gallery had a focus, and the focus was the different branches of science, because you have Mirror Master represents optics, you have Captain Cold represents cryogenics, you have the Heat Wave representing pyrotechnics. There's a lot of, like,
the Boomerang guy represents.
Yeah, Boomerang is aerodynamic. It's aerodynamics,
physics.
Right? Yeah, physics and aerodynamics.
Sure.
So from a concept, I love the cohesiveness of the Flash Rogues Gallery. Plus, they have amazing costumes. Carmine Infantino, who drew come on, you can't deny that the audaciousness of Captain Boomerang's outfit with the little boomerangs all over it and all that it's a great costume. And the Flash, I will argue, I mean, don't get me wrong, I adore Batman's look, but the Flash's original, that 60s version, might be the best costume ever created, just because it is so streamlined, and you look at the character and you know exactly what he's about. He's all about speed.
Well, that's true,
right?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I always liked Captain Cold, right? Isn't that because I always get him confused with Mr. Freeze.
Mr. Freeze, right? Yeah, there's a lot of cold bad guys out there in the DC universe.
Yeah. But I remember, the Boomerang guy, just, I don't know, when they got into like the opposite universe Flash stuff,
right?
Then I started, that's when I was like, okay, this is getting interesting. But
there's some great stuff.
But a villain like Two-Face,
Yeah.
Because to me, Two-Face doesn't get the respect that he deserves.
I think he's gotten it in the more modern era.
Yeah, well, yeah, and the animated series does him brilliantly.
Yep.
I think
Yeah.
in the original
Absolutely.
animated series, but the origin story of that character is so great, and
it's so tragic, right?
It's so tragic,
and what's even better is that one of the best things about Batman is the ability for the writers to reinvent itself without fundamentally changing anything.
Yeah.
And this goes all the way back to Batman's origin story, which was in Detective Comics 33. So it was still within the first year of 1939 of Batman's publication. But every so many issues, usually every 50 or so, the writers would go back and add a little bit more. And it was almost like a symphony, right? Where you start out with his parents are murdered by a unknown mugger, and then he vows a vow to wage war against all criminals. And the way he does that is to dress up like a bat that flies through. He gets inspired by a bat that flies through a window, and he dresses up like a big bat. And that's boom, you've got Batman, right? And he also like pumps some weights and pours some chemicals to show that he's smart.
But the training stuff comes later, right?
Right. Yeah. But then within the first 50 issues or so of Batman, in 1948, in Batman issues 47, they retell the story, but they add some more elements to it. And so this time Batman goes, you know what? I got to solve this case. I got to figure out who killed my parents. And he finds out that it's this guy called Joe Chill. And he confronts Joe Chill and he says, you know what? Joe Chill's like, why are you bothering me, man? Why are you chasing me? I haven't done anything, you know? And Joe Chill's an old man by this point. And Batman like yanks off his mask and he goes, because I'm Bruce Wayne. And Joe Chill goes, and he runs out into the street and gets hit by a car and he kills him. Right? And Batman's like, well, justice is
out of my
right?
hands. Yeah.
Oh,
right.
man.
So that's great, right? And you're like, okay, I guess that wraps up that story. No, that's not enough for the old folks at DC. Another 50 or so issues later, they actually tell the story again, but this time they elaborate that there was a person that actually hired Joe Chill, was a fellow named Lou Moxon. And Moxon had hired Chill because Bruce Wayne's dad was like going to testify against him in court or something. And so it was a hit. So now the Waynes were murdered by a hit. And so Batman then finds out that Lou Moxon does it. And then Moxon ends up getting killed also.
So it has like a conspiracy element to it.
Right. Yes. I think what happened was Moxon, like he runs in, he's like, help, Batman's after me. And Batman is Bruce Wayne. And they're like, you're crazy. No way Batman could be Bruce Wayne. But they're like, oh, Batman, huh? Batman's the guy that threw me in prison. And another guy goes, oh, yeah, Batman's the guy that sent my brother up the river. And they all go, bam, 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 and kill Lou Moxon. So again, Batman's like, hey, man, it wasn't me. It was everybody else. But they keep doing this, right? And so you get stories like Batman Year One, which is in the 80s that Frank Miller wrote. So now that starts to elaborate more on, what was Bruce Wayne doing all that time between being a little kid and having the bat fly through the window. And then more and more of these stories. And so you get, now you learn about the detectives that trained him, and you learned about the ninjas that trained him, and you learn about Zatanna's dad, Zatara, who taught him
Ra's al
magic.
Ghul,
Ra's al Ghul, that's a movie revisionist.
Yeah.
That's a movie revisionist thing. That's not part of the official continuity in the comic books. But they're just trying to streamline down a lot of different plots, because there's there's like 30 different stories of Batman getting training about different things from different people. So they were like, well, we don't want to, have him go to all these different characters. So let's just say that Ra's al Ghul is calling himself Henry Ducard, which is one of the more famous. He was like a manhunter type character that taught Batman how to track people. But then in the movie, they say, he's not really Henry Ducard. He's actually Ra's al Ghul. So,
So Scott, can I ask you about, there's always talk about how the original comic, he was a vigilante. He would terrorize and kill crooks. And they always talk about how that's how he started out.
Oversimplification. And it is one of my biggest pet peeves.
Really?
As a Batman fan.
What I wanted to ask though was, at the time when that comic came out in 1939, was that controversial, that kind of violence? Because Superman was this clean-cut hero, but was there any kind of
Superman killed dudes? Superman killed people.
But was Batman? But Batman seemed darker. Was it more violent compared to Superman?
So
did it get some pushback from?
First of all, anybody with a YouTube channel who says, "Oh, Batman killed all types of people in his early days," they're wrong. They haven't read the books.
Okay.
The first thing is this: Batman has killed and used a gun and used a machine gun, but but the majority of those were monsters. So he used a machine gun to shoot down kind of a monster off of a empire, like kind of an Empire State Building, a la King Kong.
Mhm.
He used a gun to kill a couple of vampires with silver bullets in his like within the first 3 or 4 issues. He did shoot a truck, and there were guys in the truck, and so presumably they are. It says that they are dead. So whether they died by crashing into the tree that they crashed into, or they get shot up by bullets. The problem is there's an image from that issue, Batman 33, which is the same issue that has his origin in it. And it's a picture of Batman just like blazing away with a 45 automatic. Okay. And that is and we were talking about Kane stealing, that's a picture that's swiped from a shadow image, right?
Oh, no.
The shadow shooting with the 45. The irony is Batman doesn't even use a gun in that story. And by the time Robin comes along, which is by the end of that year, so Robin is debuted in he's in 1939, and it's what issue is it? 38, I think, Detective 38. By like a few issues in the Robin, because Robin also kills some people too. He's like throwing people off of buildings, and Batman throws people off of buildings. He kills people by throwing them off of buildings just as much. And he like kicks one guy in the neck. It's Dr. Death's henchman. He kicks in the neck and breaks his neck. So Batman is killing guys, but usually they're people who deserve it. They're always bad guys, right?
That's what I say to myself.
He deserved it.
And well, the comic morality back in those days was very black and white, right?
Yeah.
And if you did bad things, you deserved to get killed, right?
Okay.
And there are a few stories, like there's a really funny story where Robin, I think this is from his solo run in like Star Spangled Comics or something, where like a guy Robin like does a maneuver where he like flips a guy, but the guy ends up getting hung or something. And Robin's just kind of like, ha ha ha, you got hung, you're stupid. And so this kind of happens until, I don't know, maybe about like issue 8 or so, or 7, where Batman and Robin are fighting some pirates. And Batman very purposely says, now remember, Robin, they're sword fighting pirates. Batman's like, don't stab these guys because we never kill. And so by that point, DC's editorial policy was like, Batman doesn't kill. And now there are issues, like there's a cover of Batman where he's using a machine gun, but it's a World War II theme thing. And so he's probably shooting Nazis, so it's okay. They deserve it, right?
Yeah.
But what prompted DC to do this? We're not killing.
Well, I think they realized that kids were reading comics. I mean, comics were always for kids and World War II soldiers. But I think it also was just like they wanted Batman to be a better example. And so by adding Robin, they gave Batman someone to talk to, so he wouldn't seem like some crazy guy just talking to himself.
Right.
And but then as he's like, well, he's got a kid and he's running around with a kid, and so he should probably be a better example to the kid. So I think it was just kind of the morality of the time.
So it wasn't like an EC Comics seduction of the innocent kind of situation.
Yeah.
That wasn't back then.
That doesn't happen until the late 40s, early 50s.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it's a little hypocritical, but by that, issue 7 or 8, Batman and Robin saying, well, we never kill. And like they even got to the point where they were like, well, we've never killed anybody, right? Like, and the old comic fans would go back and go, but wait, look, here you are shooting a vampire. And it's like, nope, never existed, because continuity was fast and loose in those days.
Right.
You were lucky, like I said, you were lucky to find the next issue of a comic, and the comics were pretty much like done in one for the most part. They didn't start playing around with the format until maybe the middle of the 40s. Like I remember one of my other favorite stories is the origin of the Killer Moth, who is a really great Batman bad guy.
The Killer Moth.
The Killer Moth. Yeah, he's awesome. He's essentially Batman's evil duplicate, right? Batman is like, they're gonna shine a bat signal in the sky, and I'm gonna swoop in and fight the criminals. And Killer Moth was like, hey, that's a pretty good racket. How about here, criminals? Here's a moth signal. Flash it in the sky, and I'll come down and beat up the cops for you.
I thought he would just fly into it.
Fly into the light. No, exactly. Poor Killer Moth. He gets them. Particularly if you see his costume, which is completely garish and ridiculous, but I love him anyway. And a matter of fact, if you want to learn more about the Killer Moth, you can visit my website called the Killer Moth Appreciation and Preservation Society.
Wow.
The only Killer Moth website online.
Yes, please.
So by this point, they start experimenting with like two-parters. They're not officially two-parters, like they don't have a cliffhanger to separate them. But the Killer Moth story the first issue is in Batman 63, and then the second story is in Batman 64, which is essentially a follow-up to that first story, where Killer Moth is in jail and he's like going, "Oh, I'm so pissed at Batman, I got to get my revenge. How am I going to do that?" Right. So they're starting to play with the format a little bit, and continuity really doesn't start to become a thing until the 60s, when the kids who grew up on the original comics are now starting to reference those old comics. And so the Silver Age, which is ushered in by initially the Martian Manhunter, but more significantly the redo of Green Lantern and the Flash, which is when they make them Hal Jordan and Barry Allen.
Right.
That's when the writers who are working on, like John Broome and guys like that, are writing these stories that are starting to reference. And then they have those little boxes that says, "Oh, we first saw the Fiddler in, whatever this issue, and then as a kid, that was another great thing, is you'd be reading these comics and you're like, I got to find that issue. So you go to the comic store, if you were lucky enough to have one, and dig through and go, hey, look, here's this thing that here's this thing they're referencing.
Kind of like the start of the whole shared universe concept, which now is like the biggest thing, like any kind of reference. And
that's right, that metaverse
connected to that. Like it's such a common and accepted thing now, but you're right. Back then, that's how it was with old movies too. That had sequels, like even the old Universal monster films didn't have the continuity was always
a little off.
Yeah,
if you were lucky, they'd show you a few scenes from the previous movie. Like I was watching Bride of Frankenstein the other day, and I'd forgotten that there was like a flat. They show you clips from the original film in it, right? I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Right. So that way you know where those are coming from.
Well, Scott, it's like Batman's created, it's having to run in comics for about 10 years, but then all of a sudden, I guess, was there just so much popularity in the comic that Columbia, when does Columbia come in to do this serial?
Columbia does their first one in 1943, so literally 4 years after Batman's debut. Batman's a huge hit. He is as big a hit as Superman is. And Batman is so popular, the character, that he gets a second book in less than a year of his debut, which is fat. Superman, it took a year. Batman Batman was in Detective Comics. The first issue of Batman comes out in spring of 1940. So it is, he's like already been promoted to the big leagues, right? He's now got 2 books. And matter of fact, if you ever come across a large amount of money and
I hope
you want to buy a good investment, I always recommend buying Batman #1 over Detective Comics 27, because Batman #1 not only does it have a beautiful cover, it has the first appearance of the Joker, and it has the first appearance of who eventually becomes Catwoman, and it has a great Hugo Strange story in it. So it's, for my money, it's the better of the two of those classic books.
Interesting.
And those serials I remember watching them for the first time. And the first chapter, when they get into all the stuff of we are rounding up all the people in Little Tokyo, and
yes, it's very.
I realize it's World War II, but
it was J. Carroll Nash, right, as Dr. Daka.
Dr. Daka. Now, the interesting thing about Dr. Daka, and you can actually find pre-release posters that support this, is originally the plot was going to be Batman and Robin versus the Joker, and then World War II hit. And they said, nope, we got to make them fight Japanese. But you can still see a poster with Dr. Daka colored with green hair and wearing maybe a blue or purple suit. So Nash was originally cast to be the Joker, but then they said, no, they pulled a 180. They rewrote the entire thing. And it's too bad, because I really would have loved to have seen the Joker represented
in that era, in a cliffhanger serial. I mean, because I have both those serials, and they're very fun, and they're very much typical cliffhanger serials. I mean, in the first one, it's like Dr. Daka has a death ray, and he's turning people into zombies with electronic. It's fun, but it's like
you got to look past some of that stuff.
I mean, yes, you've got all that stereotype in there.
And the bummer is, Kane was never, I think, very satisfied with those Columbia serials, even though he does appear in it as a newspaper boy, because if you watch those serials, they're shot during the day. The Batmobile by this point had become
it's just
a
a car.
much
It's like a
fancier
Buick.
car. Yeah, it's the Buick.
But they look like typical cliffhanger serials of the time.
It's like your dad took his work car and then like, hey, I got a costume in the trunk.
But Scott, we've talked about this before. Columbia, they were not known for spending a lot of money on these things. It was like they churned them out, and so there wasn't a lot of money spent. The actors did like 1 or 2 takes, if that, and they're just trying to pump these things out as quickly as possible.
Because they would be shown before a movie, and talk about continuity. You always have the ending where it looks like, oh, he definitely got crushed by that rock. And the next episode, somehow he dodged that rock.
It's like that scene in Misery where Annie's all upset by the cereals. Yeah. Well, it would have been so great to see back then, as Sean was talking about, to see the Joker. And to have an actor of that day doing the scenery. How much fun that would have been.
It's really interesting.
It's a real shame, we can shake our fist at World War II for that. But I mean,
World War II.
They did try to make an effort when they did the other serial, which was 1949. And that had a bad guy in it called the Wizard. But the Wizard again he looked more like a Klansman than anything else. And
that was Robert Lowry that time.
Robert Lowry was.
At least they made the Klan bad. So
that's
true.
So I mean, as a kid, I would watch the serials. Like I would, occasionally see them at Comic-Con. Usually that was the place where I could see them. But I was never very impressed with them. And I myself, as a Batman fan, I have kind of a long-standing dissatisfaction with the live-action versions of Batman. I mean, West is great, and the 66 show is probably the most comic book accurate of all the live-action shows and movies. But I really would love one day I will get to see a comic accurate version of Batman doing like a comic, in a comic accurate story. Cause that's my greatest wish is I would still love to see the comic book come to life. And there have been, great animated programs and video games that have captured that feel. But for me, I feel I've always been slightly disappointed by every live action.
I kind of agree with you because I've said this before. I'm still kind of waiting for the perfect Batman movie. And it's funny. I was just thinking the other day, we've talked a lot about the first Tim Burton Batman film and how it's not the greatest action movie. It has its problems.
Terrible fights.
But but the other thing that just occurred to me recently was another reason I think is that, yes, it was kind of fun having Jack Nicholson as the Joker, but casting a huge movie star in the role of a villain kind of takes you out of it to a point. Because in other words, I'm not watching the Joker, I'm watching Jack Nicholson playing the Joker.
Right.
Like the Richard Donner Superman, they cast an unknown at the time as Superman. If they did that with the Joker in that Burton movie, it would be, okay, this is the Joker brought to life on the screen as a character, not, it's another Jack Nicholson movie. That's one of the many problems with that movie. But what I mean?
I disagree with that though. I actually think Jack Nicholson would have been a great Joker had it been a better movie.
Well,
or if it had been 10 years earlier.
True.
Maybe. But I can understand at that time when that movie came out, why it was such a hit? Because The Dark Knight Returns had come out. There was a change in the zeitgeist, and everybody was kind of sick of the 60s camp stuff. Right. It's like, give us a dark, so I understand why it was hit, but then you look, it doesn't age well though.
Right. Well, having, of course, lived through it like you have, but particularly with the comic books, right? I didn't have the same hate in my heart about the 60s show. I kind of pin a lot of the blame on Michael Uslan, who has been the producer of kind of everything Batman related since the 89 movie. He ended up like buying the rights to Batman in the 70s, I think, or the late 70s for like a song, right? Because nobody knew that it was going to be worth anything.
Right.
And so he was a huge Batman fan, but he was the type of Batman fan that hated the 60s show so much that he's like, I'm going to do whatever I can to kind of remove the memory of this show from the collective society, right? And so his big mandate when doing the 89 movie was it has to be dark. It has to be like the original first year of Batman. There's going to be no Robin. There's going to be, no Holy this or Pal Zam or any of that. Right. And at the time I agreed with that sentimentality, right? I could
Mhm.
understand, because anytime anybody would talk about Batman at that point,
Yeah,
it was
that's all
always
year.
power
Always the
this
60s show.
All
and
year.
holy that,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, it was always the
Biff,
60s show.
Sacco. It's like, yeah.
Right. And us Batman fans knew that there was this other version of Batman that Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams were making, and Frank
Right.
Miller was making, and Brian Bolland and Alan Moore were writing about. And we're like, where is that Batman? Right? Where that's the real Batman. That's the comic book Batman. But then I think Uslan kept marching. Now I don't know what the accounting for the Schumacher films are, but I think that with
I don't think anybody understands how those.
No.
I don't know how those,
Because that was, I thought that was always trying to split the difference a little bit.
a little bit. Yeah.
And-
Yeah. It
and-
looks
and-
dark,
and-
but it acts silly.
Right. And
Yeah.
talking about the 60s show, as someone who watched that when it was on TV growing up, I always hated it because I thought it was making fun of something that I took seriously.
Yeah,
Right.
Matt, I
I
felt
lo-
the
Right.
same way, buddy.
I
Same
loved
way.
superheroes, and I didn't
Yeah.
want them to be a joke.
No,
And
It's-
same here.
What's interesting is for me, and particularly going back and watching them again, I had bootlegs, probably
I like them
you
now.
guys.
Yeah, I like
Right,
them.
right.
I appreciate
Well,
them more now. Yeah.
I love the first season. The second
Yes.
season is okay. I
You can
really
t- yeah.
don't like the third season at all.
You can tell by the time they got to the third season, they were so self-conscious about, like, let's be real. It was, you're
Yeah,
right. The third
it's
season
way
is
too much.
pretty damn weak. Even the very first couple episodes.
Oh
of
man,
that
Louis
s-
the Lilac sets my teeth on edge. Right? It's, no offense to
Yeah.
Uncle Milty, but it's just like that.
Oh, really? Well,
the
I have
minute-
a website dedicated.
I'm sure. Yeah, the Louis the Lilac website. I know. I've seen it. It's only got one picture on it. But
Yeah, but
But-
it's funny how there was a phenomena that happened and hit so hard and was so popular, but it fizzled out so quickly.
Right.
That's
Well,
what's so
But
fascinating.
it had
comics, though.
lasting
I
impact.
think- I think the minute though that the production team started to move away from adapting the comic books and started saying, "Hey, we can make this shit up ourselves," that's when it fell down. Like I'm
Yeah.
not a big. I mean, I love them, but I don't like Vincent Price's Egghead. I don't like any of the made up characters. There's none of the made up characters are anywhere near as visually interesting or acting interesting as any of the ones based on the comic book characters.
Sure.
So, so for me as a kid, I'm like, all right, I watch it and I love the show as a kid because I particularly love the fighting. Like I love seeing the punching and them leaping around and I love seeing, Gorshin and
all
and,
that stuff now I
Romero and
totally
all those
appreciate.
guys,
It's
right?
pretty to look at too.
Yeah.
No, at
yeah,
the-
it
I
is
mean,
Beautiful, vivid colors.
It's a great
Yes.
creation of it. It's a very unique creation. Like, isn't that kind of one of the first times in pop culture that you really embraced the term camp? Like, it
Oh,
wasn't
sure.
right.
Well,
I mean, like, it kind of like
the public did, right? I mean,
it was like
you
a
know,
new thing at the time, kind of.
well, it was new to straights and cis
Yeah.
people, but it wasn't new in the gay community.
Well,
Right? That
yeah,
had been
but it-
around for a long time.
But like
Sure.
pop culture for a TV show, because you had
Right,
so
right.
much.
Well,
yeah.
I would say that was a big addition to culture, but I'd say that probably the stronger thing that Batman did, other than raising Batman's popularity back up, is that it was the fact that it was a color TV show. It was one of the first color
Yes.
TV shows, and
Oh,
it
yeah.
literally made people go out and buy color TVs just so they could watch it in color. Right.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Can we talk for a second about the genesis of the Batman TV show?
Oh, well, you guys are closer to that than I am, right? Because that all took place in the hollowed halls of the real Wayne Manor, which is the Playboy Mansion. And that was Hemp
Really?
would put on these movie nights, and he would run the Old Republic serials, and he would encourage all the girls and the guys to boo at the bad guys and cheer at the heroes. And the producer William Dozer supposedly was at one of these shindigs, and he
Right.
saw how much fun everybody was having, and he said this would make a great TV show. And so he literally grabbed a handful of comic books off the news rack, and you can actually, by their release date, you can tell when he grabbed them, like literally down to the month.
Wow.
Because it's literally this band of like 6 or 7 comics. And there's one in particular, this is another comic I grew up with, which is a Batman special, and it has it reprints like 6 or 7 Batman stories, and in it is the Joker's utility belt, which also is one of the early Joker episodes. There's I think a Penguin story and a Catwoman. Like there's literally this one issue has like 3 of the stories that ended up being episodes in Batman.
Wow.
And so Dozer self-admittedly was not a comic book fan. He's like, I don't know. Other than the fact that I know Batman exists, I don't know anything about him. And so
I did not know that.
So the story was he grabbed all these comics and he went to his writers and he said, make this, and just kind of threw them the comics and said, all right, off you go.
So James, are you saying that we have Hugh Hefner to thank for the 60s TV show of Batman?
Absolutely.
Oh, not only for the Batman show, but we have Hugh Hefner to thank for Monster Party, because if it weren't for Playboy, Larry and I never would have met, and
That's
Monster
true.
Party as we know it wouldn't
Right.
have happened.
It would be
And
nothing. It would be nothing without us.
I would have
Yes.
started it with somebody else.
It would have been different.
Yeah.
And
it would have had like
it would
Egghead.
not have been as fun or entertaining or engaging.
And if I hadn't been exposed to Playboy, I would have had a miserable adolescence.
Well, there you go.
Exactly.
No,
Yeah.
actually, I mean the fun thing about Playboy, I don't want to go off on Playboy, but I literally read some of my favorite authors first in Playboy. I read Stephen King in Playboy.
Oh, yeah,
I read
yeah.
Ray Bradbury in Playboy. I read Harlan Ellison in Playboy. My dad had a huge collection going all the way back to the first issue, and so he just had them. And I was like 8, 9 years old, and I was going, "What's this?" And they had cartoons in them, and so I learned about Edward Gorey and all Vargas and all these guys, right?
I've
So
read
Playboy
some-
is a big part of my growing up.
I've read some great stories in Hustler too. There's some really good fiction.
Yeah, they
in there.
start with, "I never thought this would happen to me," but
Exactly.
Really, really, Sean. Really.
Double D Gangbang has some
Okay,
Great.
Batman. Back to Batman.
Ooh,
Well, let's talk about- let's talk about,
Larry Nervous. Larry Nervous
talk
talking
about
about
the other-
porn.
Let's talk
the
about the
adults
other
talking
thing
about the
that-
dirty stuff.
let's talk about the other thing the Batman TV show debuted, which was Batgirl. Now, she wasn't Barbara
Yvonne
Gordon was
Craig.
not the first Batgirl. She was actually the second.
No.
Yes, she was the second. There was in 1961, in Batman issue 139, there is a Batgirl who is she's the niece of Batwoman who had debuted about a year earlier, and her name is Betty Kane. But then when the Batman TV show was coming around, they said, you know what would really be great is if we had like a sexy gal running around with Batman and Robin. And so the comic book DC said, all right, we'll debut a new Batgirl, because the old Batgirl had been around for a few years and she was never very popular.
Right.
And so they said, well, let's introduce Barbara Gordon, the daughter of Commissioner Gordon, who had been around since that first story of Batman.
Right.
And a matter of fact, that first story of Batgirl is a Killer Moth story.
No.
And that issue was let's see, it was Detective 359. It's called The $1 Million Debut of Batgirl. And it's a really good story. It's a fun story. It's been reprinted a few times. And so Batgirl is pretty much been with us ever since. She's a very popular character.
Again, I learned something new here on Monster Party.
And they did a pilot. She was supposed to have a spinoff, right?
With the Killer Moth as the bad guy.
Oh,
Yes. Again with the Killer Moth.
This Killer Moth.
Yeah. He is a character up until maybe the 90s. He had more appearances than the Riddler and the Scarecrow and Two-Face combined.
Wow. Interesting. Yeah. Where's the Killer Moth movie or TV show?
Well, the rumor was going to be that the Batgirl movie was going to have him in it. But I think he was going to have like a minor part, and he might have even gotten killed. That's the rumor that I had heard in it. So to be honest, I'm kind of glad they canceled it, because I don't want to see the Killer Moth get killed.
They had a big swatter and
yes, exactly.
Oh yeah.
Nice.
So disrespectful.
Wow.
You know, it's funny, Scott, going back to, we had mentioned briefly the film from 1989. I remember going to a convention right before, it was maybe about 3 months before the release of the film. And I understand that Warner Brothers was nervous because, to me, I remember Tim Burton, he's that guy for the Beetlejuice thing, and this seems like so weird. And
Michael Keaton, he's Mr. Mom.
Well, that was the thing that sunk the whole ship, in my opinion.
Have you talked to Wally Wingert about? He wrote a whole song about it.
Oh yes, I know.
well,
he was
Scott,
so pissed off.
Well, Scott, what I was going to say was, yes, with Michael Keaton, it just didn't sound cool.
Right.
And I went to this presentation, and they had an executive there from Warner Brothers trying to showcase what was so cool about this film. And they showed the car and the sets and the costume. And I remember being in that auditorium, and when they showed the picture, the crowd went, ooh, because no one really knew.
Right.
And they were trying, because it was.
They thought it was going to be Adam West.
Well, a lot of people were nervous, and it's one of those things where we can look back now, we can criticize it, but from the very beginning with the music and the darkness, and it did take things a little more seriously, it was really cool. Yes, guys.
Sure.
Yeah, it has problems. We get it. But when it first came out, I remember being really excited.
Yeah.
And look, Michael Keaton, I thought that was an odd choice, but he was interesting. It's one of those things where maybe it doesn't.
So the funny thing about that, living in 1989 as a Batman fan, I was in my third year of college, and pretty much every year, well, pretty much all my life, I've owned Batman t-shirts, and I've worn them pretty constantly. And so I wore a Batman t-shirt, from my freshman year of college up until 1989. And I remember that when the Batman movie was about to come out, was the first time people actually was like, oh, is that a Batman t-shirt you're wearing? Right. And I'm like, part of me was like rolling my eyes going, oh, come on. Where were you 3 years ago? Right. I've been doing this my whole life. Right. So, you know how you get a little bit of that nerd, like you feel like, oh, I was into this way before everybody else. So on one hand, I was excited for the movie, but on the other hand, I was a little bit like, oh, you're now just catching up that Batman is cool.
Yeah.
Okay, well, welcome. Come and watch it with me. I'll gladly tell you everything I know about Batman, which was a lot even back then. But yeah, it was very fun to see the world finally wake up and realize that because I'd not been through Batmania before.
But when we're talking about that first movie, the Tim Burton film, we got to go back a little bit, because what led to that look and feel of that film were the comics,
Right,
and
absolutely.
Specifically The Dark Knight Returns.
Right.
And
the Dark Knight, it's actually Batman the Dark Knight, right? The Dark Knight Returns is the first book of the 4 issues. The second is Hunt the Dark Knight. The third is
Matt Weinhold's in school.
You know what? I love it.
But that's okay. But that's okay, Matt. Everybody calls it the Dark Knight Returns.
Everybody makes that mistake.
In fairness,
I let it pass.
Look, in fairness, we don't claim to know everything.
Hey,
we don't.
Hey, man, you guys invited me on and brought this upon yourself.
Exactly.
This is what we want. No, I want to be schooled. I want to be corrected. I want to know what I'm getting wrong.
No, I'm with Matt. Matt, I wouldn't even know that. You're right. I want to be corrected.
But
I want the truth. I want the truth.
But even before that, I mean, you have a build up to that time,
with the Neil Adams and the
Dennis O'Neil,
Marshall Rogers,
the Marshall Rogers
the 70s is right.
Yeah.
It was the 70s where they started to get to more grimmer, darker approach, right?
Well,
and that led to Frank Miller.
Yeah, and it's guys like Denny O'Neil and Steve Englehart, who are definitely 2 of the best Batman writers that have ever written Batman. These guys were fans of that original 1939 Batman, so they wanted to bring that sensibility back. As a matter of fact, so Englehart is a little less known than Miller and Alan Moore and some of these other guys, but his run on Detective Comics, which is the run is in the 70s. It's from Detective Comics 469 to 478. He essentially is going back and like cherry picking his favorite characters from the 40s. So he has a Penguin story. He has a Deadshot story. He reinvigorates his character Deadshot, and he writes what is arguably the most famous Joker story, which is The Laughing Fish, which is the story where the Joker poisons all these fish and makes them have the smile. The Joker smiles on them. Right. And then at the end of the story, Batman, of course. It's funny because there's another Denny O'Neil story called Joker's 5-Way Revenge, where Batman wrestles a shark, which is also awesome. So Batman has had a lot of bad encounters with fish.
That's for sure. And then also that story was made into the animated series.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, exactly.
Right.
But now, which also spawned so many other wonderful things, right?
Yeah. Spawned.
Hey!
Fish.
Oh, what a good time we're having.
But Scott, I thought I had read though that even though that 70s resurgence into a darker, cooler Batman, but for the fans and the readers, they were a hit, but they weren't necessarily a big hit financially for the comic.
Not
right?
particularly. I mean, comics in general were kind of floundering a little bit by that point. It was kind of a weird. There had been an event in the late 70s called the DC Explosion, and DC was like, we're gonna like publish a ton of books. We're just going nuts. And you get some interesting titles from that period, like OMAC, and the Joker had his own comic, and a bunch of like a lot of horror comics like Tales of the Unexpected and House of Secrets and House of Mystery, all that. Plop was a great book from that era.
Plop.
Yep. And but then what happened was it backfired, and then there became what the comic fans, the wags, call the DC implosion. And so they contracted, right? And so they canceled tons of books, and it was pretty much down to like the old mainstays. It was like Batman, Superman, even Wonder Woman was kind of on the chopping block, Justice League, Flash, Green Lantern, and then like a few other titles here and there. But for the most part, they were kind of pulling things back down to kind of the money makers.
So it was just oversaturation. Is that what?
Yeah. They made too many things. The quality was varying quality, but it's too bad because it was a real interesting experiment, which it wouldn't be the last time DC did an interesting but flawed experiment. We can maybe talk about that later. But as a result, these books were doing okay. They weren't selling the numbers because in the 40s they were selling in the millions. And they were lucky now if they were selling in the tens of thousands.
Well,
right?
Scott, can I ask a goofy question here?
Yeah.
My understanding, I had a younger brother who was really into comic books. Leading up to 1989, there was a lot of anticipation about the film Batman. Yeah. And because of that, there was a lot of stuff about what your comic books are worth. And when Batman came out, it seemed like there were a lot of Batman comics out there. And I remember going to a comic book store and they were being purchased because people were going, I'm going to buy this. I'm going to hold on to it for 5 years or 10 years. And then it'll be worth thousands of dollars. But the truth of the matter is, Scott, because the comic book companies printed hundreds of thousands of these. And so a lot of these comics that came out in 1989, 90 and so forth, you could pick them up now for like a quarter or something.
And Larry, remember the multiple covers? They do like the cover that was like 4 different covers.
Yes, man.
And holograms and
lots of gimmicks.
Scott, I have a bunch of those in my own goofy collection, but I lean more towards Superman than Batman, but still, I mean, I have a bunch of those, and none of those have really held their value.
Well, the best thing you can do is what I just got done doing, which is when Halloween rolls around, instead of giving out candy bars, you give the kids comics.
Wait a minute. Wait, you're talking crazy there, buddy. Come on.
Why is that crazy?
I'm not going to give parts of my collection out to kids at Halloween.
What if it's worthless?
What if it's just, is every single thing you have and owning in your house, Larry, do you consider a collection? Can you just give something to somebody sometime? I mean, you know what I mean? Like,
well, Larry can because he's done it for me.
I know. I'm just saying, don't you have a couple comics laying around that aren't really worth anything? Maybe you could give to a kid. Like,
right? If you have some
like you're depleting your collection.
No, he gives them to me.
And then Matt reads them and folds them in half.
I use them to light your fire in your fire pit.
I put a bunch of pot in them and then just roll them up.
Oh, you guys are so cruel. It's like right where it gets me, right here.
I can't say I don't have a large collection under my staircase that is all boarded and bagged and all that. So
of course,
I'd be a hypocrite if I made fun of people who did that too.
Oh, we all do.
We understand.
Right. But I mainly what I do is I give out more recent things because I know that the majority of them are not going to be worth anything.
Right.
And the kid getting that thing was overjoyed.
Well, it might be their first exposure to that character. Right?
Yeah,
I might be giving some kid their first Spider-Man comic or their first Batman comic, and I think about when I was a kid and when I got my first comics and how excited I was. So I feel that speculator mentality, it definitely hurt the comic industry. Yeah. Particularly now, I'm not a big fan of this thing that's been going on for a while where they essentially call them slabbing comics, where they seal them away in hard plastic cases. So, you can bag them in a Mylar sleeve and
Yes.
seal them up. And then that would, but you can still pull it out and
Mylar.
read it. And if you're careful, right, you can read it and enjoy it and put it back in and save it for another day, right? The slabs, they're sealed. They're like soldered closed. And so,
what's
so
the
you
point then?
actually, all you do is you
It's
look at the cover.
protected, Sean. The
Yeah, so,
air-
you look, so you never
air-
read. So you never read it. You
You
just
can
look at
never
a
read it.
cover for the rest of your life.
But Sean,
the
you
back.
know
what the
it's
fuck is the
there.
point of that?
The air
it's like-
inside
That
there.
is so stupid.
Don't even,
It's like
don't even
put it-
look at it. Don't
It's
even look
not
at it.
Because they're hoping
stupid.
to make money
That is-
off of it, right?
Nigel,
It's like the prehistoric bug and that
Yep.
loose
Yeah,
side.
like-
It's like,
yeah, bug and
wow,
amber, right.
I have a
Resin.
comic book. I have a comic book in a rock.
Yeah.
Wow, I'm so happy I have this. Like that's
Yeah.
stupid.
Yeah. Well,
I don't.
but
You know
it's-
what? I don't even buy the comics anymore because I want to keep them mint.
yeah, exactly.
Don't touch it.
Yeah.
The
thing is,
industry has changed a lot. The fan base has changed a lot. It's a very weird market now. I mean, I still will actively look for older comics to buy, but the prices have, every time a new movie pertaining to a character comes out. So, for example, Wakanda Forever is coming out. And so the first appearance of Namor has shot up in price because Namor is in the movie, right?
Right.
And the first appearance of Shuri, or her becoming Black Panther in the comic, that shot up, right? So every time, and now the irony is every time a new Batman movie comes out, imagine that happening to Detective Comics 27 and Batman #1, right? So there have been these, every time a new movie, now what is there, like 12 live action movies now or something like that, right? Like it just goes up and it goes up and it goes up. And so,
But then they can go down again too.
But
but they never do, right?
I've got
big ones never do.
This character was not made into a movie, but the Lobo comics. Remember when Lobo was huge?
Yep. Yeah.
Not quite so huge anymore.
No, not until they make the Lobo movie.
Right.
And they'll go back up again.
So,
right?
but look, Scott, in 1989, we get this Batman movie, and look, I understand. So for Mr. Bat Kid like you, it's not your thing, but for me, I thought it was really it was really cool. And then they started to go. It seemed like there was a decade when they were taking it into that Tim Burton-esque world.
Right.
For me, the one thing about the 1989 one and the hype around it was that, this was going to be dark. This was not going to be like the series. And I can understand why they felt like they needed to make that distinction. They needed to give it a spin. But if you were reading Batman comics in the 70s and 80s, and especially the Frank Miller,
yes,
the Tim Burton movies were exactly like the series compared to those comics.
Well,
the Tim Burton movies were colorful. They were over the top.
Yes.
Yes, you're right.
And that's what you'd expect from Tim Burton to begin with.
I know, right.
If you're going to talk dark, Christopher Nolan.
Wait, no, James, before we get to Christopher Nolan, I just want to say, look, if you were used to watching, Adam West and bang, Biff Powell, when Tim Burton's thing came along, James, it was darker.
It was darker than the
say
series.
what you want. Yes,
it was darker than the series, but that's not saying a lot.
No, it is saying a lot.
It was like dark light.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what it was.
Right. It was digestible.
It was digestible for the masses. That's why it was a huge hit.
For the masses,
It was for those regular Joes out there, Sean. Regular Joes.
If they made it right, if Tim Burton made an exact movie version of Frank Miller's Dark Knight, it may not have been the huge, massive appeal hit that it was.
And it would have been a hard R.
I don't think Tim Burton. Well, there's nothing really R-rated in The Dark Knight Returns. I would say that's again. Well, it isn't though. It's what's violent about the story is Batman's voiceover, which is very hard boiled because Miller is a big fan of film noir and Dashiell Hammett and all those great hard-boiled detective stories.
So we're talking about the comic book now.
Comic book, previously known as the Dark Knight Return.
Batman: The Dark Knight is the series. The Dark Knight Return is the first issue. But yes, that hard-boiled attitude that Miller writes Batman as this you can kind of hear it in your head as a gravelly, there's nothing wrong with the Joker. I can't fix with my own two hands. That's a quote from the book, right? And it's that kind of badass, personality. But it's also Batman at the end of his career. He's seen the world go to hell. He's kind of retired. He had given up on being Batman for many years after whatever it was mysterious what happened to Robin. The thing that everybody forgets about The Dark Knight Returns is that it's an Elseworld story. It is an alternate ending to the Batman mythos. But there have been many of those stories, particularly after Dark Knight, right? But even before, like in the 50s, there were stories about Batman 2 and Robin 2 and how the children of Batman and all the, Dick Grayson becomes Batman and they have a kid and he becomes Robin. And so these other, imaginary tales, for me, it was just another imaginary tale, right? It wasn't the Bible that it ended up becoming for so many.
It's like multiple Earths.
Yeah, exactly.
But like you said, Scott, of how that gravelly film noir voiceover, that aspect of Batman, that kind of in his head thinking, that to me has never been duplicated in any movie or TV.
Well, the
anything.
Watchmen tried to do it, right? They had Rorschach.
That's true. That's maybe it's the closest thing. But like
the interesting thing about the thing that I find the most fascinating and frustrating about The Dark Knight Returns is that you can find it online. There's an amazing interview with Frank Miller in a magazine called the Comics Journal. And Comics Journal used to have these great, very issue long interviews with these creators. And so they interview Miller as literally the fourth issue hasn't even come out yet, right? Like he's still in the middle of writing and editing, them getting this out to market. And there's a quote in there that I've never forgotten from Frank Miller where he says that the story that he's writing he says, I'm writing a romance. The interviewer's like, what do you mean a romance? And he's like, no, I don't mean a romance like, two people fall in love. I mean a romance like the old, like Ivanhoe and Robin Hood, like those old romantic adventure stories with knights, that were doing the right thing.
Yeah.
Right. And the thing that is the biggest tragedy of Batman The Dark Knight Returns is that everybody since Miller was writing about the night, but everybody else wrote about the dark. And so they missed the point of The Dark Knight Returns. The whole point of The Dark Knight Returns is it's Batman bringing back morality to a lawless city. And he's the knight. He's the knight. He literally gets on a horse at the end of the story like a knight, and he leads an army of these kids that used to be mutant punks that he's converted into his own. They call them Sons of Batman. And he leads this army against essentially the forces of darkness, which is the city kind of tearing itself apart because part of the story, there's a looming nuclear war because that was what we were all thinking about back in those days. And so Batman essentially brings order back to Gotham City and gets the people to kind of calm down. But then, of course, the end of the story is that Superman, who is kind of ended up as this position of like a government stooge, has to go and they said, look, Batman is causing too much of a ruckus in Gotham City. You got to take him down. And so Batman, spoilers for a 40-year-old story, Batman essentially fakes his own death to get Superman off his back and the government off his back. And the story ends with Batman going literally underground and raising this new generation of people to be better people. Right. He's raising these kind of mutant punks and even Carrie Kelly, his new Robin, he says stuff like, hey, don't swear. Right. Watch your language. He's still that old 1940s Batman. He's like the noble.
The noble.
Yeah,
knight.
He's a noble guy. But here's the thing. Everybody that read that book went, Batman is badass. He kills the Joker. He doesn't kill the Joker. Joker kills himself. He shoots a gun. Well, he shoots a gun to shoot a rope into a helicopter, whatever. Like they gravitate towards all this violence in the story and they don't gravitate towards the message of the story. And so for the next, we're still there. We're up until there were a few bright moments. I think Grant Morrison's run tried to rectify some of it. Tom King's run tried to rectify some of it. But for the most part, most of the writers who write Batman don't understand the character like Miller does.
Because you're not presenting a fully realized character. Right. You can't have a comic that has lasting power if it's a caricature every time. How many times are you going to laugh at that same joke?
Well, and that's my biggest problem with the Christian Bale movies is it's all dark, no night.
Well, but it is pretty darn cool because come on, Scott. After the whole Burton world and the Schumacher films,
travesties,
when it came to these Christian Bale ones, my God, these were just great. These were, to me, they were like, ooh, even more serious.
I think the first one actually is a realized character for me.
All right, so here's also, you remember I talked about my dissatisfaction with the live action Batman movies, and it's most exacerbated by Batman Returns, but I feel the same way about the Nolan movies, which is we are being presented with movies about characters that are named after the characters from the comic books, but not about the characters from the comic books. So the Penguin in Burton's Batman Returns is not the Penguin of the comics.
He's the Catwoman. Penguin.
The Catwoman in that movie is not the Catwoman from the comics.
No. But she looked hot. She looked hot. Come on.
She did look good. I admit that. But all the Catwomans looked hot, right?
Yeah, sure.
But they weren't Catwoman. Like the closest I think they came was, I think Zoe Kravitz did a very good job kind of capturing Selena Kyle
in the latest
modern
one?
version of it. Yeah.
Okay, but
I hope we can talk about
Scott,
that.
Well, Scott, I would say the problem with that movie, and there's many as far as I'm concerned, is that
you didn't like that, Sean?
I didn't like it either.
No, there is zero chemistry between Batman and Catwoman in that movie.
It's also the same warmed over bullshit that we've been presented.
Yes, and
over the past 25 years.
Wait,
yes,
what do you mean?
And the other thing, there's another problem with almost all the Batman movies is, and especially in the Batman, the latest movie, he is a fucking terrible detective.
Yeah, he's awful.
He is terrible. He's laughable. He's like, wait a minute. All these clues pointing to a bird and wings.
Yes.
What could it be?
No,
oh my God, it's terrible.
It also takes itself way too seriously.
Oh my God, it's so dreary.
We're supposed to be like
it's somber
with all.
I loved it.
I go on forever.
I loved it.
There's nothing fun about it. There's no.
It was fun. It was cool. First of all, it looked great, and the thing I really appreciated is people know who Batman is. They know the origin story. Batman's been around for a while. So what's cool about this film? Here's this new Batman. My first thought was, are they going to go through the whole Howie? No. It starts. He's Batman already.
I like that part.
And I really appreciate it. And look, I know you, before you guys all crap all over him, I just want to, tip my hat off to Robert Pattinson because,
he did a fine job.
He was not the problem.
People say, oh, the Twilight Kid. Look, he's done a lot of stuff. And
Larry,
I thought he was great.
He's fine. He's fine. It's the writing in the movie. You have the Riddler, which they're going for like this Seven or Saw kind of like bad guy, which got so old after a while.
I didn't like it.
How about we've planted bombs all through Gotham City? How many fucking times has that been done?
So we can't plant bombs anymore, Sean? Is that what we're saying?
Not for the 85th time in a Batman movie. No.
Larry, you're not allowed to plant bombs anymore.
I say so. Starting now.
I mean, other than the Riddler's trash bag costume, which I hated.
It's terrible.
Although it made sense for the story, but I still hated it. But yeah, Sean, I'm glad you said it because Batman, all he does in that movie is solve one riddle at the beginning. But but when you watch the movie, everything the Riddler plans on doing, everybody the Riddler plans on killing, everything the Riddler plans on blowing up happens. Batman does not prevent
He's a terrible superhero.
That shows
terrible superhero.
No, he is a good superhero.
Well, he looks really cool, but he's fucking useless.
No, he's very useful.
He's useless.
And then those scenes of him wading through the water with with the lights, and it's supposed to be like, is this your Oscar moment? Are you?
Oh, please!
I wanted to kill myself.
Everybody talks like this. What's going
on?
All
movies now.
No,
that's mumble acting.
No, you don't want to. You don't want to be loud like me, Sean.
I watched 3 episodes of the '60s Batman TV show in the same amount of time that it takes me to get through that slog.
I'm right there with you.
I'm sorry, I disagree. I had a lot of fun with it. I really enjoyed it. I thought I know James probably.
James,
I'm just saying that I really enjoyed it.
We know, Larry. James,
okay.
Yes, we know.
I was honestly pretty stoned when I watched
I should have been.
Wait, what? What's this? You went to a movie stoned?
I watched it at home, and I was feeling no pain, and the whole thing just sort of washed over me. I don't remember.
That's how it is.
You don't
Anyway.
remember it at all.
It's unmemorable. It's like it takes forever to.
Is this a first? What is it, Sean? You don't like long movies? Is Lawrence of Arabia long?
No.
See, that's
a good movie.
Oh, it is a good movie.
Yeah.
Scott, what was your?
Sean. Do you know how much money that film made? By the way,
Who fucking cares, Larry? Who fucking cares?
If that's your level, you keep bringing this up. Well, it made a lot of money. It won an award. It doesn't mean anything.
Nothing,
All
Larry.
It doesn't mean that it's good.
I can't.
What are you? Are you sheep? Just go with whatever the crowd does.
No, I like to be entertained. I'm not like jaded like you guys. Like, oh, I don't like this Batman movie. Yes, yeah.
We just like quality. That's what. That's my sin. Is I like quality.
Regular Joe mean terrible taste.
Okay, let's see what Batman expert thinks. Come on, Scott.
Well, what I was gonna say. It's perfectly fine for Larry to like what he likes.
Yes, it is.
It's perfectly
fine for us to like what we like, Larry.
And it's perfectly fine for the rest of us to be dissatisfied with the end result. Right. Because there is still plenty of Batman out there for us to enjoy.
True.
Particularly if you are a fan of the DC produced animated movies. There are 36. There are 36 animated movies now available, and they've made everything from adaptations of The Killing Joke and The Dark Knight Returns and The Long Halloween, as well as a bunch of original things like Batman Ninja, which is really cool, and Batman versus Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle. And there are so many of these wonderful films. Now, some of them have their issues, and the voicing of Batman, it seems like a pretty they bring in a lot of actors, so it's very infrequent that you get the same folks doing Batman twice. Right. And that's and the quality of the animations sometimes are better in some and not so good in others. But there's a lot of really good Batman to watch. But of course, I will have to say that in the realm of animation, I have to say the best Batman movie ever made is the Lego Batman movie.
What?
It is
the Batman.
I have to see that still.
It is the most true to the comics.
Really?
Now, granted, there's comedy in it, so you have to be able to put up with kind of the silly Lego humor. But every supervillain is represented, including the Killer Moth and lots of other obscure characters.
That's why you love it so much.
It is a very sweet story about why Batman adopts Robin and how he needs a family, a Batman family, to be who he is. And so I highly recommend it. It was
I've heard
such a joy to watch it.
Does it have Batmite?
One of them does. I know.
I forget.
I think
so. I think the
Man Bat. Man Bat.
It does have Man Bat in it, and it does. Okay. I don't remember seeing Batmite in it. He might be in the background somewhere, but I don't.
Right.
I don't remember. He isn't like up front and center like he was in the Brave and the Bold cartoon, which is another fantastic animated thing. Yeah, I love
that. One thing I can say, and I think James will probably agree with me on this too, is that of those movies, those animated movies, really just the DC ones in general, I'm hard pressed to think of one that I didn't at least enjoy. Right. They're usually so good. I mean, I love the ones that came from like the Kevin Conroy period. I mean, I love Mask of the Phantasm.
Yeah.
I saw that in the theater, and I thought it was just
so did I.
Incredible. Yeah. That's still my favorite Batman movie.
Up until the Lego Batman movie, I said that was the best theatrical representation of Batman I'd seen.
Great.
Well, Scott, if I may ask, because I don't want to ignore the elephant in the room here, because we just kind of passed it. But how did you feel about Justice League and Ben Affleck as Batman and that whole arc there? What did you think?
And the Zack Snyder's version?
Right.
Yeah.
So I have very controversial opinions.
Oh, good.
The first is that I think solely based on his performance and the scenes in the Suicide Squad movie, Affleck might be the best live action Batman there's ever been.
You see, I do like him a lot.
You see, it's funny you say that because I liked him too. And I remember when this all happened and he was cast, there was a lot of uproar. And for some reason, either he got wind of it or felt it. And then he was trying to brush it aside or something. It's like,
I don't know.
And
I will say this. the Batman versus Superman Dawn of Justice film and the Justice League movie are horrible movies.
Yes, they are.
And I feel bad for Affleck because he should have gotten a solo Batman movie and he would have killed it, I think.
Yeah,
I think he would have crushed it.
I do.
And I think those movies crushed his spirit and made him sad. You know, there's that famous meme of him just looking so bummed, right?
But I did think that the Zack Snyder version of the Justice League was better because it played like in chapters, kind of like a Netflix limited series.
Because I don't have HBO Max, so
it's a big improvement. It really, but it's certainly not a masterpiece, but it's a much better because the original version was just like it was cut off at the knees. It was just like
well,
you could tell.
Sean, did it seem like it just seemed rushed? Didn't it seem rushed?
Absolutely.
And I remember Sean and we talked about this about the villain, how the villain didn't look that good. And when you looked at the Zack Snyder cut,
it's very, very different. Yeah.
I mean, first of all, the villain looked great. There was another villain on top of it.
But the way it's paced and they explored it just like I said, they did it. And it really should have been a Netflix limited series or something because it's done just like there's chapters, there's cards that come up.
It's really, it's
very
really
different.
Cool.
It's just a way different. If you can look at it, if you approach it fresh and just kind of forget that first version of it, it's a better movie. But
once again, Ben Affleck was not the problem.
Okay, I just wanted to say, look, for all those people out there, for all those haters out there, I just wanted to say that I wasn't a big fan at first when I heard the announcement, but I liked Ben Affleck, and look, I'd like to reach out to him now and just say, if you'd like to come on the show, a Monster Party, if you're just joining us, we'd love to have you on to talk about it.
You know what? Ben Affleck is known for listening to a podcast,
crashing podcasts. Yeah.
And the thing about Affleck is that he does come the closest, I guess, and this is by design, to the Frank Miller because it's an older Bruce Wayne and coming out of semi-retirement.
Sure. And his look in the Justice League film, it looks a bit like the Frank Miller
he's
when
got
he's got that armor suit on, I mean, he's fine. He's fine. It's everything else around him.
Now I have to say though, and I know there's been some shade thrown at Christian Bale, but I love Christian Bale, and maybe that's just me. I mean, I am a huge Christian Bale fan. I like him in pretty much everything he does, even if the movie is bad. I usually think he is interesting or entertaining. Right. And I loved him as Batman, but I thought the movies got gradually worse. I know everybody loves The Dark Knight, but
I do.
I love the Joker in that, and I find that interesting. But I don't think think it's a really well written movie.
I love elements of those films, but I don't. But as cohesive as a whole, they don't. I don't know.
I think Heath Ledger was amazing, and
he was. That's
just regurgitating what everybody else says, but making the Joker a flat out anarchist, not just this colorful supervillain, but making him someone who's so, so much of a sociopath that he just doesn't give a shit. He's not in it for the money. He just wants to wreak havoc. And making that so pure and in the presentation and the performance, that to me was beautiful. I'd never seen anything like that in a superhero movie, and I loved it.
He's the best part of the movie. Yeah. Wow. Well, that's our show.
So let's talk about Jared Leto.
Oh yeah. Well,
not good.
There was like when he first comes on the screen, I'm like, okay, maybe I just got to get a little used to this, and it just doesn't. It's a little bit. It doesn't gel.
Overdone somehow.
And Scott, just for the audience who doesn't know what you're referring to, what is it that you're referring to when you?
I'm referring to his appearances in the Suicide Squad film
as
the Joker.
As the Joker.
As the gangsta rapper.
Not as Batman.
The Joker.
As the Joker.
The punk.
I mean, look, I appreciate different interpretations and stuff, but it didn't do it for me.
Well, that movie is so horrible from so many angles that I mean, that was just one more thing. Yeah.
Well, okay, so that that then leads to the new one, even though this isn't really Batman related, but it will be most likely.
Yeah,
and that is the second Suicide Squad film, which now is directed by the fellow who's running the whole enchilada, right? James Gunn.
James Gunn
has recently been put in charge of the whole DC theatrical
That's
universe.
right. That's right.
Yeah.
Right? Are we excited about that, or are we scared?
I enjoyed that second Suicide Squad. I really enjoyed the Peacemaker series. I mean,
I love Peacemaker.
If they're going to go with that kind of approach, it's obviously going to be more adult oriented, and I mean,
comedic.
look, and comedic, but like, I don't know, like if I'm going to see that kind of like hard-edged R-rated superhero movies coming out from him, that could be interesting. I mean, I don't know.
But I don't want them to all be R-rated movies. So that's the thing.
Well,
Okay,
I
don't want a G one.
Well,
Why not? Why
guys,
not? What's wrong
let's
what's
look
wrong
at
with
it.
G?
Let's put.
There might be kids in it.
Look,
Like Robin the Boy Wonder, actually,
Exactly.
Scott,
8 or 10-year-old
Scott,
kid?
if we all put our studio executive hat on for a moment, we do know that when you make a rated R film, yes, it could be popular and stuff, but you're not going to make as much money as if it were a PG film.
Right.
I think James Gunn is very talented and he's very capable, and there's so much riding on this that I feel that it is going to be more. Maybe it'll be PG-13 or something like that. But I am excited about this because I think it's a guy who understands the comics better than people who've been doing it in the past. And also, he does like to have fun, and there is fun stuff in it. I think
he's not taking it too seriously.
I think
he's also willing to embrace the fact that DC. I mean, Marvel has its moments where there's some dumb characters and dumb things that have happened. But DC, because DC has been around longer, there's way more dumb things that have happened in DC Comics, and even in the Batman series, particularly in the 50s and the that period when the comic code had clamped down and kind of removed all the horror and violence from comics.
Batman meets Santa Claus, and
Batman met Santa Claus in the 40s, so that predates the code. But the fact that James Gunn is able to reach deep into the rogues gallery of Batman and pull out a character like Mr. Polka Dot and put him into the Suicide Squad. That to me goes, this guy gets what's cool about DC, because everything, even no matter how dumb it is, it can still be made cool.
Yes.
And that's what I'm most excited about, right? Is seeing him do that with other characters. And maybe I'll get Killer Moth for a change.
Yeah.
It's also the tone of humor, because that's very important. Like he gets what's funny and how to craft a joke that's character driven and make it all fit in this world that he's created. He doesn't do what Marvel is now doing, where they play fast and loose with the tone of a movie, where one moment it's serious and the next moment it's, you got Thor taking his clothes off and like
you flick too hard.
I'm so done with that. And that's what I've loved. And it's also what I loved about the Deadpool movies.
Says the man with a Fing Fang Foom figure on his shelf.
Well, that's real. That's real. That actually happened.
But that's the thing, and we've talked about this before in this podcast a lot, is that, the Marvel movie franchise, I still think consistent wise overall, it's done an incredible job with that universe. Yes, they go too far with the jokey stuff at times. And DC, we talk about Batman versus Superman or the Batman, like they can go so far the opposite. Oh my God. Yeah, so James Gunn kind of like, I think he might be the right fit in there. Right. So it's like, and it is fascinating how the Batman movies and the DC movies, how much they've changed, and they're just all over the place, and it's like this revolving door of styles. And that's again why I appreciate the MCU for the most part has got this consistency, which takes a lot to do, and like,
it's true.
But so like you had the Tim Burton movies, and you had that chunk, and then they kind of go bad with Schumacher, and they have the Christopher Nolan ones, and they kind of get weak towards the end. And then you have the Zack Snyder one. It's fascinating how they keep trying, and there's good stuff in there. But I'm curious. I'm looking forward to see what they're going to do.
It's not the first medium in which DC has had to reboot, right? So they're trying to reboot. They're going to have to reboot the movies most likely, but the comics have been doing this for decades. The first big one was for Batman. So Batman survived the Silver Age reboot. He survived it mostly unscathed. He had what they called the new look, which essentially put a yellow circle around the bat on his chest. And that was, and they kind of downplayed the supervillains a little bit. So there's more like horror and crime stories. But then the next big reboot is Crisis on Infinite Earths, which really was Batman survived moderately well. Again, Batman is very resilient.
Yeah. Yes.
And there's a great quote. My favorite quote is from Frank Miller, and he says that Batman is immortal and is undestroyable as a many-faceted diamond. You can interpret him in 100 ways, and they all work. And I think that's the secret to Batman's success, is that he is probably, out of all the superhero characters, the most malleable. So if they introduce a skinny Robin or a skinny Alfred in the Republic or the Columbia serials, and he's fat in the comics, they say, you know what, let's make Alfred skinny. If they have Robin referred to as being killed in The Dark Knight Returns, the comic editors go, well, maybe we should look into killing Robin. Maybe that's what the fans want. Batman has always kind of bent in the wind to the pop culture and to all types of the whims of where comics were going, and yet he's always kind of come out of it unscathed. And the last big one that happened, there was an event in it was called Flashpoint. It was in 2011, and DC was like, we're just going to change everything. We're gonna have the Flash run through time. It's going to mess up time for everybody, and it's going to rewrite. We're going to relaunch every one of our comic books with issue number 1, which, monetarily, number 1 issues sell great. And so it seemed like a good idea. But what it did was it wiped out, 75 plus years of continuity. And the stories, most of the books were very grim, dark, kind of like this modern version of Batman. And they were just, comics were like a really bummer of a place to be for a while. All the stories were very dark and so in 2017, I think, they finally just said, all right, forget it. The program that they had done after Flashpoint was called the New 52. And they scrubbed all that. And they said, all right, let's just get back to basics again. But again, Batman didn't change too much. As a result, they relaunched, they rebooted characters, they got rid of some, they brought in new ones. Superman went through a huge colossal change where they literally killed off the New 52 Superman in the new books of Superman, had him die heroically, help saving something. But Batman, again, Batman's like this surfer where he just kind of rides out the waves, right? And keeps going. And so I have to say that as a longtime Batman fan, this last, since 2017, Batman has been up until recently, maybe up until the last year or so, Batman was one of the best runs in Batman I'd read in a long time. And a lot of it has to do with a fellow named Tom King, who's also very controversial. Some people love him, some people hate him, but he wrote 85 issues straight of Batman. And he had been building towards this very elaborate story where Batman is going to propose to Catwoman, but meanwhile, Bane is working kind of behind the scenes to tear down everything about Batman and destroy him. But then the father of Batman, who was from the Flashpoint series, had survived from another dimension. And so he wanted to make sure that Bruce Wayne was never going to be Batman again, because he's like, I don't want my son to be miserable and be Batman. So I'm going to do everything I can to kind of destroy everything around him as Batman so he can just be Bruce Wayne. And it was this fascinating story, and there was all types of twists and turns, and Dick Grayson gets shot in the head and loses his memory for a couple of years in the books. And there's just these huge sea changes, and it wrapped up really nicely. And it was a really satisfying series of comics. And so, at least for, as of a few years ago, Batman felt like it was heading in an interesting and good direction.
Interesting.
Cool. I have to say that my favorite Batman, if I had to pick, someone put a gun to my head, if the Joker put a gun to my head and said, pick your favorite Batman, it would have to be hands down the animated series from the 90s.
Yeah.
I mean, it is so, to me, it's perfect.
It is.
It's the purest distillation of all things Batman.
Yeah.
It adapts stories from the comics. It creates the original things are a little weaker, particularly in the first season, like the guy who runs the slave camp, and those are a little weaker, right?
But the Two-Face stories are great.
Two-Face, they reinvent Mr. Freeze and give him an origin he'd never had. They make Two-Face a much more sympathetic character. They introduce Harley Quinn, who is possibly the greatest character added to the Batman mythos ever. I mean, I don't even think we've had a good character since Harley Quinn, right? Although even now she's getting a little, like, people are getting a little bored with her, right? She's been, I think, a little
bit
overexposed.
oversaturation with her.
Overexposed. Yeah.
But yeah, I would agree with you, Matt. The Batman animated series is a high point in the entire legacy of Batman.
Was it in the new Harley Quinn animated series that brought some controversy because of Batman going down on Catwoman?
Well, they say that superheroes don't do that, right? And so everybody said, what? Superheroes don't eat pussy? You know, what's going on? Right?
That should be the name of our podcast.
Right.
No.
The Splinter one, right? No, it was, I mean, that series is a lot of fun. It plays fast and loose with some of the characters. But again, it does kind of what Gunn does, which is it takes these relatively obscure DC villains like Dr. Psycho and King Shark and folks like that. Even some characters from the Harley Quinn comic book are in there.
And Clayface, what they do with Clayface is so much fun.
It's great. Yeah. And yeah, I haven't seen the third season yet, but I really enjoyed the first two.
It's a lot of fun. It's genuinely funny. And I mean, my God, all the actors that you get in there, I think it's terrific. And I like the fact that they went this way, that it's like, hey, look, you know, we can create our own comedic universe where Commissioner Gordon is a drunk.
Right.
And
well, that's the really great thing about DC Comics, although I know that they're kind of wrestling with it again and trying to get their hands around it. But DC has always had a very vibrant multiverse, this idea that there can be, I mean, at one point they had mapped out 52 distinct planets that each of them had their own version. Not all of them had Batmans and Supermans on them, but for the most part they did. Right. And these are things as diverse as, you know, the steampunk planet where, you know, the Batman from Gotham by Gaslight lives.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Or the little toddler planet where the Tiny Titans are at, or the planet where Captain Carrot and his amazing zoo crew and the Batman on that planet is a mouse, like Batmouse or something like that. So there's so DC readers have always been open to this idea that, yeah, there's just all these different versions, and some of them I like and some of them I don't. That's how I treat the whole Batman mythology, is everything is valid unless I don't want it to be, right? Like I will take a story where, you know, Batman turns into a zebra monster and, you know, is shooting negative rays off him, but I'll also take The Dark Knight Returns where he's very grim and dark and they can exist. That zebra story happened to the same Batman in The Dark Knight Returns, right?
I don't know if you know this, but I actually worked on a Batman animated series. Beware the Batman.
That's right.
Nice. The CG one, yeah.
Yeah, I wrote 2 episodes with friend of the show, John Matta.
John Matta.
That's awesome.
And we were very lucky because we got 2 episodes featuring Professor Pig and Mr. Toad.
Oh, fun. Yeah. Yeah. From the great Grant Morrison Batman and Robin's run. Right?
That's right.
That's a really interesting period because in the comics, Batman had been killed by Darkseid, but he was really sent back in time. And so Dick Grayson, it wasn't the first time Dick Grayson had stepped up to be Batman, but Bruce Wayne had a son with Al Ghul. His name is Damian. He's a real son of a bitch. But Dick Grayson essentially was like, you know, we're going to be Batman and Robin now. And what was brilliant about that concept was Grant Morrison, the writer of it, who's an amazing writer, he said, all right, instead of having a mean Batman and a happy Robin, we're going to have a mean Robin and a happy Batman. And I loved it. And the artist, Frank Quietly, is an amazing artist. Mm-hmm. And I really, that whole series is one of my favorites of the 2000s. I think it's one that you definitely should seek out because it's some great art and some really fun writing.
Yeah.
Now, can we talk a little bit about toys?
Toys, yes.
Of course,
merchandise. Yes.
Now, in the 60s, with that show, there were a lot of tie-in products. It was a boom. There was a beautiful lunchbox that's totally unaffordable, but Hallmark actually reproduced it in miniature form, and it's gorgeous.
Oh, really?
You can get it for like, you know, $15 on eBay.
I heard a rumor, James, that they are reissuing that lunchbox with the McFarlane 1960s like repaints of the Joker and the Penguin, and it's going to come with, I think, a full-size lunchbox.
Nice. Oh, I'm there.
Yeah, me too.
To those suckers who paid hundreds of dollars for
Yep.
it.
Yeah. The lunchbox confounded me for decades because I had a friend when I was in grade school and he had that lunchbox and I lusted after that. And it was, of course, not, it was not available at all by the time I think he got it from like an older sibling. And for decades, I was like, should I buy the lunchbox? I don't know. And I kept seeing it go up in price, but it was always hard to find a beautiful, one in beautiful condition. So I am hoping that I can get my hands on the McFarlane one because I have dreamed of getting that for decades.
Hey, Scott, when it comes to lunchboxes, we've had this conversation before where we were talking about Halloween costumes. And like, for some reason, I never got the Halloween costume that I actually wanted. Somehow it was, that costume was gone. And so I had to settle with something else. The same thing happened with lunchboxes. I never got the lunchbox that I wanted. It was always like, I went in there for Star Trek and I came out with like the Roadrunner.
Well, I was lucky enough. I did get most of the lunchboxes I wanted. I got the Star Wars one. I got the Super Friends one. And those were really great lunch. I wish I still had them. I don't. They got mangled. I
think one of the first ones I had the HR Puffin Stuff one.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it was beautiful. Yeah, I know. Yeah, it was awesome.
But yeah, the lunch boxes, and it's funny you bring up the costume. So for like, I don't know, maybe the first, probably from the age of 4 to 9, I went through a Ben Cooper Batman costume. Like my parents would buy it. I was Batman like every Halloween. And then I would like cut my tongue to ribbons on that little plastic.
Yeah.
And then I would get rid of it because I'd outgrown it. And then I'd buy another one the next year. And I still have one. I have an older one. It's when they first were doing cloth. Like when they first did them, there were cloth bodysuits and plastic masks. And then they changed the ones that I had growing up were plastic, like that vinyl, super flammable vinyl.
Exactly. Somebody smoking a cigarette.
The one good thing about the Batman Ben Cooper costume was it was one of the few ones that actually didn't have the face of the character on the chest.
Wow.
It did have the bat signal, and it did say Batman in the bat signal, which still annoyed me as a child.
Yeah.
Sure.
But out of all of them, I think it's probably one of the more faithful Ben Cooper costumes out there.
Well, Scott, it's funny you should say that. You actually found that Batman outfit. I wasn't really thrilled with Batman, but I thought Batman was cool. So I asked my mom, hey, can I get Batman? Well, so what she got me wasn't really Batman. It was more like the Bat crime fighter. And I actually am holding up a mask. Well, I'll have pictures of it on our Facebook page. Yeah. But I actually have a mint in package
look at that
version.
The crime fighter.
The crime fighter.
How?
It's funny because it was trying to capitalize on all the Batmania. But what was funny about my particular costume is my mom thought the mask was okay, but she didn't think the outfit was very cool. And my mom made a little Batman insignia for the cape, which I still have. And I wore this. I wore this at kindergarten, and there's this great picture that I have of all the kids having a parade, and my dad was there, and he took a picture. And there it is. And it was funny because as I look at it, I actually had these big black gloves which had fringe hanging from them. And then my mom took a giant rubber bat and pinned it to this dark shirt that I had on.
Nice. That's awesome.
That was this was back in like 1970 or so. But it's funny because there were a lot of costumes out there that were kind of Batman-like, you know,
a little androgynous.
I sense this a trend with you, Larry, because didn't you have like a Creature of the Black Lagoon costume that was also like the knockoff version, right?
Well,
was that your childhood was just a succession of knockoff costumes?
Yeah. Well, look, I was never lucky to get the darn creature costume. You know, we would always get the Woolworths, you know, like 2 days before Halloween, and what's left here's Lance Link, Secret Ship, you know, and Secret Squirrel. You know, wow,
Ooh,
you
kind of a bat.
He's a crime fighter. Yeah.
So you know, I
you know what somebody should do? Somebody in one of the new James Gunn movies, somebody should create that character crime fighter and make it based on that. It's a little in joke, you know.
Hey, and awesome. by the way, where is the really dark Secret Squirrel movie?
Yeah.
You know,
where he kills people.
No, it's funny. I was more of a monster kid than a Batman kid, really. So I know that my younger brother, he was more into Batman. He did get, there was a beautiful corgi die-cast metal car that was based on the 60s series. But it's funny is in Japan at the time, they were making a lot of these battery-operated toys that were unlicensed. And maybe it didn't actually say Batman. It would say Man-Bat or Bat or
the Batmobile would be red instead of blue.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny, I've seen these go for hundreds and thousands of dollars now if they're in great shape with their boxes and stuff.
Wow. Yeah, the Corgi Batmobile was much like the Ben Cooper costume. I went through like a Corgi Batmobile a year because I would go to Disneyland. And do you guys remember when Disneyland used to sell Corgi cars? They had in the Main Street Emporium. They had a whole area where you could buy little Corgi cars. And every year I would buy the Batmobile. And then like the next year it came out with the boat on the back. And the next year it came with the helicopter. So I'm like, but I would always thrash. So I don't even think I own a Corgi Batmobile anymore. I may have one wrapped, like an old one wrapped up somewhere.
You played them to death. Yeah,
I did.
Yeah.
I mean, I did that with my Migos. I did that with my Ben Coopers. I did that with, I mean, and that's, you know, to me though, I wouldn't give that up. I wouldn't give up. I mean, good for you, Larry, that you have your mask and stuff sealed away in plastic, but I'm also glad that you were able to wear it and enjoy it and have your mom make an awesome costume, right?
Yeah.
So we can get the best of both worlds, right? As a collector and an enjoyer of the fandom.
I have my Mego Batmobile.
Yeah,
that's cool. Batman and Robin. And I love those.
Awesome.
And I know we've talked about Mego before, Matt. Wasn't there there was one that had the cowl that you could remove?
Right.
The original one had
right?
But then there was a one where it was like built in, right?
Yeah,
that's the one I had. Yeah.
Yeah, the 1972 version, which came in the closed box, had the removable mask. That was the first one I got. And then about 2 years later in 74, they came out with the non-removable one because I think in general, Mego was like, well, the kids are losing the mask and it's
harder to make, more expensive to make.
It also looked kind of funny. It didn't.
Yeah,
it kind of didn't really work. Yeah.
Now the thing though that is for me has been amazing is there's a company called Figure Toy Company.
Over
the last like 10, 15 years, not only have they made gorgeous versions of Batman and Robin and Joker and Ra's al Ghul and characters that Mego never made, like the Flash and Green Lantern and Harley Quinn and all that. But they also made a line of 1966 Batman figures, which I was like, oh man, I love the Mego figure. He was my first Batman figure. I adore him. But I think in my heart of hearts, that's what I really wanted was the Adam West. Because that's what I knew from television, right?
Yeah.
So to have these new versions that are gorgeously made, and
that company's also that company also put out like I think every Super Friends character, every villain. I mean, it's really amazing. And
it's like if you don't want to shell out or can't shell out like $200-300 for the Hot Toys Adam West, Batman and Robin, you can for a fraction of that price.
Yeah, no, they're completely affordable.
Well, they also reissued all the original ones, so you can buy that removable cowl Batman that you never got as a kid, right?
Right.
Yeah.
No, it's fantastic.
They have a Swamp Thing. They did a Swamp Thing. I mean,
awesome.
So great.
And there's also like there's websites and on eBay, and you can find like little accessories, like a little Shakespeare head.
They put out the van, the VW van. I think.
Well, did you have issues with that? I remember seeing that. Go, that's dumb. He didn't have a van like that, a Volkswagen van with a little net touching on the front.
Larry, I'll tell you this. He didn't have a van in the comics. He's never had a van in the comics. But man, I love that Bat van and I love the Joker van. Those were two awesome vehicles that I had. And
I remember the commercials for them.
And I had the big Wayne Manor with the working elevator.
Now that was cool. That was cool. I mean, that made sense.
Awesome.
And it's funny how the whole Batman stuff. I mean, there have been all these companies now that have specialized in making really beautiful collector pieces. Like, I think one of the most this is the Mezco Batman. It's a blue one, and then they just came out.
can't reach them for more map, but there's a black one they just
Oh yeah, I
came out
see.
with
Yeah, wow.
as well, right?
But
and this
but
is
all,
it's such a gorgeous, super articulated. It comes with multiple heads. The cape has wires in them,
Oh,
so
that's
you can pose
awesome.
it. Different hands, different accessories like batarangs and ropes, and
So cool.
so if my little 6-year-old, 7-year-old self knew that this was coming, I would lose my goddamn mind.
Yeah.
Right?
But Scott, the point is, isn't it amazing now that this character that has been around for such a long time now, there are these items and toys that are made now, and they're fantastic.
Yeah.
One of my favorite Batman pieces that I have is there was this set that was put out that had a book, and then it had a first appearance Batman. And that's also one that has
that 12-inch figure, the Chronicle Books one.
That has wires in the cape.
I love that figure.
And it's like I never thought anyone would ever make this.
Well, and at the time nobody was making that. And then DC Direct made one, and then there's now about 5 different versions of that, not to mention statues and all types of I don't know if you can see it. I have the you can't see him, but the Batman statue I used to have up there. But yeah, I have a particular love. So I've gotten to the point as a collector. I used to buy everything Batman, and then at holidays, my parents would buy me, my mom would buy me Batman bath soap, and I'm like, Mom, I don't need the Batman bath soap. It's okay. but I still love action figures. But I've gotten to the point where there's so many action figures and so many versions of Batman that are out now. My tastes have really become very rarefied. And so personally, I don't buy any old Batman anymore. I will only buy Batman's based on the Golden Age version. So that that one I showed you, the and I'll buy year one, with the big pointy ears and the purple gloves and all that. But other than that, unless they come out with something that's just never come out before, like a version that I've never seen before, that is this is the Marshall Rogers Batman. They've never done a true Marshall Rogers Batman. So if they ever come up with that, I will buy that. But other than that, I have so many Batmans. I have boxes full of Batmans. I have a world famous bathroom that is filled with Batman art and figures and statues and stuff like that.
Take some pictures.
I'll send you pictures. But it's there's a lot of Batman to collect, and I'm at a point where I'm like, I kind of feel like, I need to cut down because it's just
we say that every day.
Scott, I did have one question for you because I know you're a big Batman expert. You have a lot of Batman stuff. By any chance, do you happen to have any original Batman artwork?
I do. I don't have many, and this is what I kick if I could go back in time and kick myself, because I literally could have bought a page from The Dark Knight Returns for $300. But in 1986, when Frank Miller was selling it, I was, I was a kid in high school. I was a senior in high school. So he went $300, right?
No, it's a lot of money. Right? Yes.
Now I did get him to sign my books. So, and what's really fun is I got him to sign the first 3 issues, and I had his wife at the time, Lynn Varley, sign the first 3 issues. But the 4th issue hadn't come out yet, and I was getting it through mail order. And so I finally got the book a few months. It ran late. I finally got the book, and 25 years later, he was signing at a Barnes and Noble in Hollywood. And I went and opened up that 4th issue and said, I have been waiting 25 years for you to sign this. And he signed it. So I have a whole set signed.
Wow.
That's great. That's great.
Oh,
that's one of the prized possessions I own. But I do own Tim Sale, the late great artist who did
I love Tim Sale. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. He unfortunately passed away this year. But he, as a engagement gift, gave me a page from The Last Halloween. So I own a page of The Last Halloween that was given to me and my wife as an engagement gift. I have some original pieces of art by Dick Sprang, who's one of the early, I have a drawing of the penguin from him. I have a Batman drawn by Jerry Robinson, who was one of the first outside of Bob Kane. He was like the second Batman artist. I own a couple other pages, but not a lot. And in retrospect, I don't know why I never went for original pages. I would get signatures, and I would, mostly I would just like to go up and shake the hand of the person and tell them I really appreciated what they did. And I was like, I just want to thank you for all the pleasure that you brought to me over the years. And so, I have a lot of stuff and I have a lot of cool things, but compared to what I could have got, I could have got some amazing things, but in the end, I'm okay with that. I like what I have.
Yeah. As my wife always tells me, you have a lot of stuff. You have a lot of very nice stuff.
And then the second half of that ... is like, when are you going to sell some of it?
Well, I thought you were going to say the line comes from me and I say, but I don't have enough.
Oh my God.
But I don't have that thing.
Well, there is always one more thing, right?
Yeah,
I mean, we are all collectors in our own way.
Whether
it's a glorious sickness.
Right. Whether we collect toys or we collect movies or we collect memories or we collect knowledge, there's always one more thing to obtain.
True.
Yes.
True.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about Batman, bringing it back to topic, is because Batman is one of us. He's a collector. His Batcave is filled with memorabilia of his past cases, giant robotic T-Rexes and giant pennies from the Penny Plunderer, and giant Joker cards from a story that was actually never told, and the Mask of the Red Hood. And if anybody from DC Comics is listening, I have a great spin on this angle. It's an angle nobody's ever done with Batman before, and I want to write it. I want to write about Batman the Collector.
Well, you heard it here first, folks.
And to quote, Jack Nicholson, where does he get those wonderful toys?
Right. Well, he beats up bad guys and then takes it from them. That's right.
There you go.
So Scott, with all this Batman history, like with James Gunn now taking over DC and with the comics, like, do you know what's on the horizon in the Batman universe? Like, what is the big next thing coming out?
There's a lot of exciting things. So in the comics recently, within the past year or so, Batman has lost his fortune. And so now he's essentially a Batman operating without a budget. There's a bad guy, a robot bad guy called Failsafe that's trying to destroy him. He'll fail like everybody else, but he's an interesting character. In that Tom King run that I was telling you about, Alfred was actually killed by Bane. He had his neck broken, and as a result, Dick Grayson actually inherited Alfred's fortune because Alfred was getting paid all those years from Bruce Wayne, and he left Dick Grayson $1 billion. And so Dick Grayson is now using that money to do like good deeds in his town of Bloodhaven that he lives in. And that book is beautifully drawn and very well written by Tom Taylor is the writer. And I always forget the name of Bruno something is the artist, but it's a fantastic comic. There's a really good comic series that's it's about to wrap up called Batman Urban Legends, which is a bunch of short stories. And they have some fun. Like there was a really good story about Batman's dog, Ace the Bat Hound, in it. But in the other media, we're getting, I think it just came out. There's a video game called Gotham Knights in which you can play as either Nightwing, Batgirl, Robin, or Jason Todd, who is one of the other Robins, now known as the Red Hood. In that, Batman has died, and so the protégés of Batman are trying to keep Gotham City under control.
That's cool.
And then, of course, we are, because they haven't canceled it, we are presumably going to be seeing Affleck and Keaton again in the Flash movie, both as Batman, because it's a multiverse-based story. So Ezra Miller is going to be running through different universes and encountering different versions.
So
of
kind of
DC
like what MCU did with the Spider-Man film.
Yeah. And then the other thing, I'm hoping it comes out. Although there was kind of a big aftermath with the Discovery purchase of DC and Warner Brothers. A lot of things got canceled, like the Batgirl movie. And the one thing that I heard might be on the chopping block or was on the chopping block, but then other people have approached the creators, was an animated series called Batman Caped Crusader, which was being done by the original team who did the Batman animated series, but it's more pulpy. So Batman looks like his 1939 version with the long ears and the purple gloves. And it's supposed to be more detective centric, more creepy, more horror, really hearkening to that year one of Batman. So I hope that comes out because the creative team is amazing. All the artwork that's been shown is amazing. I hope somebody wises up and decides to make it.
Cool. Awesome.
Cool.
Sounds wonderful.
It really does. I think we could go on and on.
It never ends.
Yes.
It never ends.
There's always more Batman, as the saying goes.
Yep.
Sure.
Well, Scott, I want to thank you so much for being with us tonight.
It's been
to
amazing.
talk
So
about
much
Batman.
fun.
I feel like I've really been educated about a lot of things. There's stuff that's out there that's common knowledge, but you know a lot of stuff that people just don't know. So thanks for straightening us out. I really appreciate it.
Like they said, I lived it, so I know.
Now, Scott, you work in board games and video games. Do you have?
Yes.
Are you working on anything now that's about to come out that you can tell us about?
I have two things coming out that should be out. One comes out in January, and the other I think should be either this month or next month. So the first is an expansion for the board game Marvel Villainous, and it is called We Are Venom, and it's based on the character Venom from Spider-Man.
Cool.
And it was a lot of fun to work on, and it was surprisingly one of I did do a little work on Superhero Squad years and years ago, but really it's like the first comic book related thing I've designed. And so I was very excited to work on that. The other has nothing to do with comics, but it is a board game adaptation of the 1976 Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie.
Oh,
So
nice.
Wow.
So you can play a nice family game trying to flee Leatherface and the rest of his family.
That's
and that comes
awesome.
out in January from Trick or Treat Studios.
Leatherface is my superhero, so
He wears a mask. So
That's right. That's
Oh, nice.
And an apron.
And an apron.
That's right.
Flaps in the wind.
The utility apron.
yeah. Nice. That's awesome.
Well, Scott, thank you so much. This has been so much fun.
It's been awesome.
Yeah, it's great. Thanks for having me.
Fantastic.
And I this is a topic that I like, and I never really get to go on like this. So
No,
this has
great,
been a huge
man.
treat for me. So thank you very much.
It's
Of
been
course.
such
You
a
got it.
pleasure.
Let's raise a toast to Batman and Scott Rogers.
Yay.
Man, Scott Rogers.
Time for a listener shout out.
Shout out.
Shout out, shout out, shout out, shout out, shout out, shout out.
Ow.
We are such children.
We are.
This goes out to Nick Wilson from Oak Park, California.
Nick
All right,
Wilson.
Nick.
Da, 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 da.
Nick is the proud owner of a Monster Party t-shirt and a Monster Party shot glass.
Nick, yeah! Enjoy that shot glass.
You can drink
is-
while wearing a shirt.
Yeah. Or you could take the shirt and you could like pour alcohol through the shirt into the glass
Yeah.
to get
See?
that extra Monster Party essence.
Remember to
Distill.
wash the
Distill.
that glass out by hand, though. Wash it by hand.
Yeah, do
Yeah,
not
not-
dishwash it.
Dishwasher safe, right. Nick, thank you so much for your support. We are glad that you enjoy the show and purchase the items from our
Yes.
eBay store.
Yes.
Also want to shout out to, speaking of Batman, our good friend Wally Wingert.
Wally Wingert!
Hey, our old pal.
No,
Yeah.
Wingert!
And now Wally obviously has a big history with Batman. He was very influenced by the show and Adam West. And,
I'll say.
Yes.
he got to work with Adam doing voices for Family Guy, and Wally has been a huge Bat fan.
Yes.
Wally is now working on his own animated series called Christoween,
That's right.
which is when Halloween and Christmas sort of cross over into each other,
Yeah.
which,
Isn't that great?
he describes as Tim Burton and Dr. Seuss had a baby.
That's a good description. Yes.
It's a 13-story series, and if you Google Christoween, like Christmas and Halloween, Christoween,
Right.
and check it out, I think you'll be very entertained. So please check that out and support our good friend Wally Wingert.
Absolutely.
Right. That's right. And I would also like to put in a special shout out for Julie Ann Ream.
Julianne Reed!
Julie Ann Ream is the curator of the Valley Relics Museum in Van Nuys.
She's
And
one
Matt-
of the curators.
She's one
she
of the
pointed
curators.
out. Yes.
Yes. And Matt and I had the privilege of visiting this museum right around Halloween, actually on Halloween Eve, where they had this amazing exhibit. First off, the Valley Relics Museum is this amazing museum dedicated to like Western culture, pop culture, lots of like
stuff from the valley,
antique ephemera and old California,
neon signs
and cowboy stars, and it's really beautiful. But for the special event, which they called the All Hallows Eve Halloween Haunt, they also decorated the whole museum with all this monster stuff, and they had especially this special dedication and tribute to makeup effects artist Jack Keevan. Now, Jack Keevan is kind of like an unsung makeup artist in the days of classic monster films. I mean, we all know the Bud Westmores and the Jack Pierces and the Paul Blaisdells, but Jack Keevan also worked on many of the classic Universal films like Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, It Came from Outer Space, all the creature films, The Mole People, This Island Earth, The Land Unknown. He designed that great T-Rex.
I love it.
But also he created the monster and was a producer on the independent film from the 50s, The Monster of Piedras Blancas. We all love this is like the nasty, scary version of the creature, kind of. And he designed this monster, and this is a film that is kind of famous because of a publicity still that we always see in famous monsters of the creature holding a bloody decapitated head.
Right.
Oh, my goodness.
And like I saw that in Famous Monsters before I even saw the movie,
Me too.
And so they have this little area of Jack Keevan's stuff, and they have the original decapitated head.
No, you're kidding. The original head?
This head was in like a paper bag in Jack Keevan's daughter's house.
Not even a joke. Yeah,
it's amazing. We got to speak to his daughter. Courtney Joyner was there to talk about Jack Keevan and his contribution to the industry, and it was fantastic.
It was a great event.
It was
great. I mean, it was amazing. And he also had the mole people head and hands.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just a delight.
It's great. And
you have to go to this museum because you can still, the stuff is still there.
It's going to be like through January or February. The Valley, just look it up. It's the Valley Relics Museum in Van Nuys, California, and it is absolutely worth checking out. And Julie was amazing. She set us up with a little table there. We got to interview Don Gluck. We interviewed John Goodwin, makeup artist. We got a lot of people. It was really fun, and we'll be posting some of this stuff too soon.
Yes, we will.
Yeah, and it's really, really awesome. So just a shout out to Julie and everybody at the museum for letting us, Matt and I, be there and just experience this and celebrate Jack Keevan's career. So a big thanks to Julie and Reem and the Valley Relics Museum and everybody there, and to C. Courtney Joyner for telling us about this event and kind of setting us up with Julie, because it was fantastic.
That's right. And also, if you have an event that you want a place to hold it at, the Valley Relics Museum is, I mean, you're not going to do any better. This place is so much fun. It's so colorful and lively, and it has a real warm quality to it, almost like a family atmosphere. Yeah. And it's just great. So you have to check out the Valley Relic Museum. And while we were there, I met an author. His name is Bruce Scivali, and he is responsible for this book, Copper Rock's Word Search Series, and it's through Henry Gray Publishing. And what it is, it's a book full of these word search games that, you experience them in newspapers and whatever.
Sure.
And it's a square with a bunch of letters, and you circle the words that relate to the topic. And so he'll have one that the topic is Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. And so you have to go through and find all the words of actors or things that happen. And
cool, nice, fun.
And then even more obscure ones like The She Creature from 1956. So you can find him through henrygraypublishing.com.
Nice.
And one final shout out. I have to give a shout out to Brent's Dolls. We all know Brent's Dolls, right?
Oh, yes.
Yes, I have a few.
So if you go to eBay and you go to Brent's Dolls, this guy, Brent Sorensen, makes these wonderful custom figures of characters that, we love distinctive dummies.
Yeah.
But this guy goes off a beaten path a little bit.
Yeah. It's also Mego Figures style.
Yeah, it's that size.
It's
that scale. But I mean, he's done some really unique characters, and the one that I needed to have.
You had to have. You would die if you did not have
this. If I didn't get this, something is wrong with everything that I believe in the world.
Yeah.
He made a Luther Heggs character, Don Knotts from The Ghost and Mr. Chicken.
Oh my gosh.
And it looks fabulous. The sculpt is great.
Wow.
He's got the hat. He's got the big bulky camera.
Really?
And the suit is perfect. It's wonderful. And then even now, this is one of those things too, where even though you can take it out of the package, I don't really want to because the card is so beautiful.
Yeah, the cover art they do is great.
Yeah. And so it's the little variation on the movie poster. But
oh my gosh,
right.
What's happening to you?
It's wonderful.
You don't want to take it out of the. Are you rubbing off? Am I rubbing off on you?
You are rubbing off on me, and I'm rubbing off on you. But hey, Larry, I have a bunch of Mego figures that I've tacked to the wall, all still in the package.
Get out!
That's a cool idea. Actually, it's for display.
Because I like the cards.
Well, Matt, I've seen that figure, and I think it's amazing. If there's anyone that needs it, it's you.
Thank you very much, and I will take a picture of this thing and share it with you guys.
Yeah, Brent has put out some great stuff.
Attaboy, Brent.
I've like the Frankenstein meets the space monster figures. Like, who's going to put out that?
Right, exactly. And again, as much as we love distinctive dummies, and we do,
of course, no. Between the two of them, we're just going to go broke. I mean, it's just it's just going to happen.
Brent is doing an amazing job, and there are certain characters that'll come up. Like he did Inframan.
Yeah,
wow.
He did Ernest Borgnine from The Devil's Reign, for God's sake.
That's right.
Come on.
That's amazing.
So please go to eBay and go to Brent's Dolls.
And it's Brent's with a Z and Dolls with a Z. It's
thank you very much.
Dolls. Yes. It was one word. Yeah.
Brent's Dolls.
Yeah. Check it out.
And speaking of eBay and Monster Party merch, as we mentioned earlier, you can find Monster Party merch on our eBay store, which is called Monster Party Store, or just go on eBay and type in Monster Party Podcast. We have the Monster Party t-shirt that we made up for the last Monster Palooza.
Great.
Beautiful. We have the legendary Monster Party cap with 18 billion stitches.
Oh, we're back to this one. Okay.
Cool.
Larry, got anything to say? No,
how many stitches?
Larry just took a sip from his flask. And
he's over it.
He's over
it. Listeners know the truth.
Yes,
they have billions of stitches.
600 stitches, right?
Okay.
No.
Okay. Again, I'm laughed out.
Individual
stitches. There's a lot.
A lot of stitches.
Why do we all talk over me then? Go ahead. No, it's okay. Go ahead, James.
How many stitches, Larry?
No, I'm done. I said it. Go.
Okay, a lot of stitches.
I was trying to shut him up, Larry.
It's a beautiful cap. It's a beautiful cap.
And the holidays are just around the corner, thank you.
That's true.
Bring some cheer.
Are you threatening our listeners to buy our cap?
No.
Is that your new character? Psycho Chris Kringle?
No. It's like the holidays will be here soon. So, we don't know how long we'll have these things in stock. So you may want to,
So get them before Larry comes down your chimney and
threatens you. Shove some mistletoe or the sun don't shine.
Is there anything else, James, that we have?
The aforementioned shot glass, which is a beautiful little item. You can toast our guests at the end of each episode. And the monster. Well, the Monster Party PPE cloth mask, which is okay. Well, now we might be past the point of needing to wear the mask in most places in public, but it's still a beautiful little item. Oh, and while we have it in stock, if you're a Monster Party fan, you certainly want it in your collection.
Well, also, we live in the Valley, and, there's a lot of low-flying airplanes, as Larry will attest to as well. And maybe you need to put on that mask and just, get a little fresher air. And how much more fresh air can you get than from a Monster Party mask?
That's true, yeah. It's a filter.
Yes.
And if you happen to be a Patreon member, then with your eBay purchase, we will send you free surprise goodies. Surprises.
Sure. Yeah.
Courtesy of Jason Lindsay and Biff Bang Pow Toys and Ted Haynes, creature creator extraordinaire.
That's right.
You are correct. And we can't thank them enough.
Yes, indeed. And this Patreon sounds very interesting. I know very little about it.
It's very interesting.
What can you tell me about this Patreon thing, Matt?
Well, I can tell you a lot of things, but you know what? I'm going to go with the truth.
Please.
And the truth is that Patreon is this platform that if you sign up for it, you will have access to all these extra things, this extra content, bonus content, if you will, from Monster Party. And we're talking bonus audio episodes. We're talking our shows like Monster Party Masterpieces and Larry's Toy Time and our new show, Monster Party Memories.
Oh, yeah.
Very
Fun stuff.
Very exciting. Yes. It's an exciting time to join Patreon.
Yes.
And so we also have, science fiction story collections put together by my stepfather-in-law, John Bordeaux. And so, yes, we're always trying to come up with new things to present to you.
Yeah.
But just the stuff that we have so far, good Lord. I mean, that's just enough to join right there. I mean, the minute you join, you have access to our backlog. And yeah, I mean, it's just like you've got the golden ticket.
Ooh.
Yeah. So just shove yourself in that chocolate lake and get stuck in that tube and just smile and be happy.
Enjoy. Yeah.
It sounds wonderful, but I got to say, I'm spending all my money on Batman toys. So I don't know.
Are you?
It sounds a little unaffordable to me.
Well, if you're Bruce Wayne, well, then of course you can afford it.
Yeah.
Wow.
But let's say you're not. Let's say you're just regular Joe. You know who that is.
Yeah.
Regular Joe.
Regular Joe.
Regular Joe, what do you got? I don't know. You're searching in your pockets. Maybe you got $5. Well, that's enough.
What?
That gets you in. $5 a month.
That's insane. You can't get a bottle of bat shark repellent for that amount.
Do they still make that?
I think so.
Oh, I'm going on vacation, so I might need some. Although I'm going to Scotland, so I probably need a Loch Ness Monster repellent.
True.
Yeah. All right.
Nice.
Well, so there you go.
Wow. Well, that's awesome. So how do you join?
Well, it's very simple. All you got to do is you go to patreon.com and you go to Monster Party, you click the join button, you follow the instructions, and next thing you know, you are in a bat cave of delights.
Oh, well, I'm there.
Dirty.
Well, let's also remind our listeners that we are on social media. We are on Facebook and YouTube at Monster Party TV. I think we're still on Twitter at Monster Party HQ.
What does that mean?
Well, for now.
I heard there's
Twitter, a lot of changes.
Some changes on Twitter. I don't know. I'm not following.
I haven't heard anything about this.
There's just been talk. There's been talk in general about Facebook and Twitter are kind of on the way out. So
really,
Isn't that interesting?
Who could ruin something so great?
Yeah, I wonder.
I'm guessing only like some sort of dickhead millionaire.
I don't know.
A billionaire.
Oh.
And we are also on Instagram at Monster Party HQ. And hey, if you're following us on whatever platform you're following us on, please take a moment, find a way to write us a review or just send us your thoughts. We would love to hear your thoughts and we will read them on the air.
What I'm trying to figure out is, what if they just send their thoughts? How's that going to work?
Telepathically.
Do you know something that we don't know, James? Do you have some ability? Is this turning into the Fury?
You have to sort of type them on some device. I think that it works that way. Sure, I don't know. I'm a little, older than the kids on these things.
Kids,
but I think you got to type some words.
Okay. Like although I am going to keep my psychic alert in case somebody sends their thoughts.
True.
Good. Back up.
On that note, I am Matt Weinhold.
I'm Shawn Sheridan.
I'm Larry Strothe.
And I'm James Gonis.
Keep America strong.
And enjoy Batman.
In all his bat forms.
And Ben Affleck, if you're listening, come on the show. We can make the hurt go away.
before you record,
What? Too late.
I was gonna say Happy Godzilla Day to you.
I know.
Hey, happy Godzilla
Oh.
today.
You know, like many important events in my life, I forgot it.
You know, look, we all
And my
have
wife's furious. How
Look.
dare you forget Godzilla Day?
you know, look, we all have busy lives, you know.
We're jet setters.
But look, we all celebrate Godzilla in our lives on a daily basis.
Every day.
That's
So is
true.
this
Every
the
day is
day? So
Godzilla
is this
Day.
the day that it came out in Japan?
This was the day Godzilla was hatched.
You just blew my mind.
Well,
Now I had
see-
no idea Godzilla
no.
was real. So
See, Scott
I
says
need to go to bed.
hatched, but Godzilla wasn't necessarily hatched unless you're thinking you're going pre-atomic.
well, of course he was
age.
hatched.
Well,
He's got to be
what-
hatched,
what-
and
wait,
then he got,
wait,
and
no,
then he got a
wait,
radiator.
out of
right?
an egg? Out of an egg? Is that what you're?
Yeah.
Oh,
He's
so
not a
does-
mammal.
Because
So today-
Minya.
No,
Minya
no,
came out of
no.
it. What do you mean? No.
So you're saying that
Son of Godzilla.
Son was no.
Maybe have you seen it?
Yes.
Apparently you haven't seen Son of Godzilla.
No, I'm talking about Godzilla.
sleep
the
through
first
that part?
Godzilla. Hello,
Oh, so-
hello, Godzilla, Godzilla calling.
So Godzilla
Hello.
was the baby Jesus, like he just like came out of nowhere.
Immaculate conception.
All
Thank
no,
you.
all I'm saying is you're saying that today Godzilla hatched when
Yeah.
it's not.
So you believe life of Godzilla starts at conception?
Do you know that some snakes are born not in an egg?
This is
but
getting
they
controversial.
slither out?
Yeah.
You know, we'll save this for our Godzilla egg.
Yeah.
Who came first, the Godzilla or the egg show?
Okay. No,
Hi,
I did.
Scott.
I like
Welcome to Batman.
Matt, I posted this morning on across our social media a happy Godzilla Day. So
I
Yeah.
believe
Yeah.
you. It was a particularly busy day.
I'm
and
sure. No, I'm just letting you know that
that's
I try to
wonderful.
represent for us.
Of course you do.
Yeah,
You do a wonderful
appreciate it.
job, but unlike the kids, you guys,
Kids.
I don't have my face in the phone all day. But I get it. You
Yeah.
guys and your
Oh yeah, I just
TikTok,
like sit around all day, doing tweeting on my phone. Yeah,
and
that's all
you
I
have
do.
like a little Hello Kitty charm that
Yeah.
hangs from the.
Yeah, I just post little wacky things all day, and that's what I do. Yeah, I have nothing better to do.
Adorable. All right. See, we're already having a good time.
Are we? Are we really?
Well, you're always a little bit late to the race, but that's okay.
Oh yeah. Oh yes, Mr. Late Bloomer. That's me. Okay.
No, late to a good time.
I show up when the party starts. I am on
Right.
time.
And
Yeah.
you end the party every time.
That's true. John makes a good point.
Well,
When Larry decides that it's over,
Yeah, it's
he's gonna
over.
get out of the way.
well, I can't argue with Sean, but Sean, it's not out of it's just out
I
of
think it
just
is
a
out of
natural
you
thing.
know.
it's courtesy.
It's totally out of you know.
I mean, okay. Let's say your mom's
I am
having a
Larry.
party. No.
The show is over.
Your mom's having a
Scott
party.
Rogers,
and you-
return to your life.
See, it's like we brought Scott over. Your mom's there. We're all like having a little good time, and your mom's like, "Well, it's getting kind of late." And I'm the guy that goes, "You
is
know what?
that?
You're right. You're right. Hey, let me talk to the guys. Hey, guys, let's kind of close it out here because
You must
need
have
to let
been. You must
Mom-
have been a delight in high school. What an exciting kid you were. It gets to be 10:30, and there's Larry on the street corner going, "You know what? My mom would really like me home."
Ding, ding, ding. You're ringing the bell. Ding, ding, ding. Come on in. Ding, ding.
hey, I'd like you to know that
Your evening custard is ready.
I was a happening
And hot
guy.
chocolate.
Remember, I had Angel Flights pants. None of you guys
Yes,
did.
I remember. No, I did not.
Scott,
Larry.
no, Scott, did you have Angel Flights pants?
I'm kind of afraid to ask what they are.
Good for you,
No, I
Scott.
There you go. I've been on the Angel Flight in LA.
Oh yeah.
I
I've
did
read
a,
it
I
on
did a
Flight.
brand of acid called Angel Flight.
Batman. Batman.
A topic
Let's-
is Batman.
Well, it's not just a Batman.
That's true.
It's
Batman.
well, it's,
It's a spicy superhero.
Father
the-
Guido?
the-
Italian ripoff of Batman.
The legacy. Hello, come
No,
on.
it is the legacy. It's the history, and it's the
Influence,
influences and
pop culture,
anything,
dynamo that he is.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
not. We're not talking specifically about the '60s one or Tim Burton, everything.
Yeah,
Yes.
And to be honest, I would be happy if we stayed away from the movies and the TV shows. To be honest.
Wait,
Well, then you're gonna lose all these guys.
Wait a minute.
See, we have about 5 minutes left.
Don't be. Well, I'm Mr. Batman novel here. So come on.
They're called comic books, Larry.
There's a lot of Batman.
Well, I'm talking. I'm also interested in talking about the toys. Right? I don't know if you guys. I don't know if you guys like the toys or not. I
like the toys.
Toys.
Yep, that's a good book.
He has a book about toys.
Yeah, I have a book about that's. But I mean, that's Chip's book. It's okay.
Here we go.
You know him. It's Chip's book. Hey.
Also, the video games are worth talking about. And
I would love to hear about all of this stuff.
Yeah,
especially,
right?
I would also like to hear, just to kind of get things on the right track here. One of the things I would really like to know is there are so many ways that the DC universe has been started and restarted over and over and over again. At some point, I need you to walk me through at least a little bit of that to know where the fuck we are now.
But Scott, I'd love it if we could start at the history.
Oh, hey, Chip. You know Chip too?
You know Chip? Oh, does everyone know Chip but me?
Chip's right here.
Okay. No, but Scott, just so you know, I mean, imagine that we're a bunch of morons. I mean, for listeners who don't know, it's like I want to be able to talk about where Batman started.
Like an overview.
So we can segue into all of these other cool things. Because let's face it, there's a lot of stuff about the Adam West and the 60s and stuff, and I was hoping we wouldn't concentrate on that. We would do kind of like the overview and the arc, and there's all these things that you could pepper it in.
And then school
I feel like a lot of people know the 60s stuff. They know the movies and all that. But, I have, like you, now, how you guys have grown up with Monster. I was a Monster kid too, but my focus has always been Batman. Like when you guys were reading famous monsters, I was reading Batman comics. When you were looking at the creature feature Topps cards, I was looking at the Batman cards from the 60s. When you guys were playing with your Godzilla vinyl figures, I was playing with my Mego Batman figures. So Batman has always been my number one nerddom, right? It's my
we
main
should save the rest of this for the show.
Yes,
I love it. This is great.
That is perfect. So why don't we? So Scott, you know how we play the game here. Matt is going to introduce the show. We're going to introduce ourselves, say what the topic is, and then we're going to bring up who our guest is, and then we're going to go to town. Okay.
All right. Let's go.
And then
Gotham City.
Yes, and then Scott, of course, at the end, when we get to the end, I'm hoping at least 90 minutes worth. When we get to the end, and if there's anything you wanted to plug, something that you were working on that listeners can look forward to, or something that just came out, or anything, if you can tell us anything, it would be great.
Yeah, sure.
Cool. Sounds good, man.
Does anyone else have any questions?
You only want to go 90 minutes?
Well, no.
Scott, I don't want to go much more than that.
No,
I'm the guy who edits this fucking thing.
Well, let's just say between 90 minutes to 2 hours. And I know we could go longer. I know that, but it's like I'm trying to maintain a certain level of if we leave the audience wanting more, then that's great. I can have you come back.
I know. When Larry's lightning strikes, that's when you have to wrap it.
How about we do a lightning round?
This has been great. We can go on and on.
I'm Mr. Buzzkill. I know. I'm sorry.
No,
all you have to do is just pay no attention to him, and it kind of works for a while. Well, this has been great. No.
So, and then we have the introduction to Scott is going to be done by
James.
James Gonis.
Oh, it is James. Okay, great.
James Gonis, yes.
So make it,
Shut up,
buddy.
Stop.
Direct me,
Stop.
Larry.
Yeah, you don't have to say that.
Yeah, because now, again,
really
one more
that
time.
Name. Save that.
We don't want. Every introduction doesn't have to be someone screaming into a mic.
Oh, that's right. You're right. Oh, we have to tone James down all the time. I know he's Mr. Wild and Crazy guy.
No, he's not. He is him. He's our FM DJ.
You know,
he's our voice of sanity.
Trying to
Hey,
lift
everybody,
him. I'm trying to
James
lift him
Gonis.
up, and you are just kind of shooting him down.
No,
Yes,
I'm not.
you
I'm
are.
telling him to be the James that he is. To not put on some fucking clown pants and jump up and down with his intro. Unbelievable. Scott,
All right.
I'm sorry.
Let's
I'm
do
just-
it.
The
I'm
We're
just
going to
president,
sad
have you come back tomorrow because
I
this
was
is
going to say, I'm just sad I missed out on Comic-Con because I would have loved to have had this in person.
And there's
That
one
was
thing that
good.
I forgot to ask you about.
Which was
Pennyworth.
the TV
Did
show.
you like that at all?
I have not seen that.
I've not seen it actually.
I watched 2 episodes and I thought it was actually pretty fun. So
think
I
it's
haven't
back
watched
for a
the
new
rest of it,
season.
but
Yeah, the
You might
live
like it.
action TV Batman stuff has been real hit miss with me. I tried to really get into Gotham,
I never.
and I even actually hosted online like 1 or 2 episodes of like the Gotham recap show. I think you can find it somewhere. Me like
Jeez.
as a TV host, but yeah,
Yeah.
it got nuts and way
No.
off the rails, and
I
just, yeah,
agree.
didn't
Yeah.
do it
Is
for
it,
me.
is it still airing? Are they still doing
No,
seasons?
no, it's over.
guys.
Okay.
Yay.
Yeah.
Scott, did you ever listen to our crossovers episode we did it years ago? It was the only time I ever had a comic book story idea.
Oh,
And if you can
okay.
indulge me for 1 minute, because
Yeah,
I have
let's
it in
hear
my
it. Let's
brain
hear
right now. It's a graphic novel story or a comic arc story, and they never put on their costumes. But the crossover is Bruce Wayne and Tony Stark, and they're millionaires, and it's all in the corporate environment.
Right.
It's all Wall Street. They never have to put on their costumes. But Lex Luthor is trying to take over each of their companies. And Bruce Wayne and Tony Stark are also dating the same woman. So there's rivalry there. And they're so obsessed with that rivalry over the girl that they're not paying attention to what Luthor is doing with their companies and the hostile
Right.
takeover.
Nice.
But as soon as they realize it, they overcome their rivalry for the woman and they work out their corporate maneuvering and they're able to defeat Lex Luthor at his own game.
Nice. Well,
But in the process of this, so they basically like bankrupt Luthor, but in the process of this, they lose the girl to Luthor. So Luthor gets the girl
nice.
and he's bankrupt. But
He was always going to get her.
But the final joke is that the government decides that Luthor's too big to fail, so the government bails Luthor out. So at the very end, Bruce Wayne and Tony Stark, they don't really defeat Luthor and they don't get the girl, so they're drowning their sorrows together. And one of them says, "Wait, what are we bitching about? We're both millionaires." And that's it. Happy
Right.
ending.
I like
They
that.
never put the cost.
I think you should write that, but I think just change the name slightly, right? You could make it whatever, like Rory Stark and Bob Wayne or something.
Scott, I'm too lazy to write it. I want somebody to just pay me a lot of money for it, and they can do it.
Right. You get the serotonin rush by just telling the story, right? That's the danger of being a creative person is if you talk about your ideas too much, you get that high, and then it's over. I don't need to make it.
Then it's over, and then I can go watch TV.
I now have an idea from your idea. It's the same pairing, but both their companies crash and fail, and they're out of money, but basically it's like Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas.
They go on the road.
Right.
And it's all their adventures. And in between all that, they have to do every once in a while. There's a moment where somebody goes Iron Man, the other person goes Batman, and they're trying to hide it from the other. But some well-placed acid. Yeah, there you go. Right, exactly. We could. Hey, James, we could.
Matt, we could
not do this together.
I love it.
Right.
I love it. I won't call you tomorrow.
Awesome. Let's not have lunch.
We won't sit in a meeting.
Give me a sec.
Wow, you've gone showbiz.
No. I have to go back to the earlier. I have to tighten it. I gotta make it seamless. Okay.
Create a space in front of you and then walk through that space.
Segue.
What does that mean? What does that mean?
That
What
was
does that mean?
That was
That's
something
some
from,
actory thing that people tell. Like, what
that
the
was
fuck?
that was from an, that was
Okay,
from
okay,
an
I
acting
got-
class I went to.
That's ridiculous.
I have the segue. It was so obvious. I'm embarrassed. Okay.
Here we go.
Okay.